Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto Zanka no Tachi and Bleach. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Ryujin Zangetsu 17 and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Onto the story. Like a raging fire, he was falling. He was through the sky that was surrounded by nothing but the blackest of darkness. Memories he had long since forgotten began to cloud his mind. The betrayal of the people he trusted, his execution of being brought down by the very flames he controlled, his decision to wipe out every Quincy that plagued the world of the living. All past memories on why he chose what he had to do to see that Soul Society and that of the world of the living was protected. So this is what death feels like for a Shinigami. I honestly never thought that I would meet my end like this. The oldest Shinigami mused a bit, an odd emotion that he hasn't expressed in a long time. His small brown eyes closed and a small peaceful smile seems to travel across his face. To him, it has been a very long time since he had a chance like this to ever feel peace without the many burdens he carried on his shoulders. He could feel the wind blowing across his body, but he welcomed it with open arms. His legacy was over, the man he once was is no more, he was no longer the Shinigami who was known more as a demon than anything else. His time was over, the new generation would do what he couldn't, and they will protect the Gate 13 like each and every last one of them had sworn to do. As he continued to think about the thing he has done since his life was over, he felt that no matter how hard he tried, his body could not move. But what was the reason for him to move now? He had been killed by the same man that he sworn he had killed 1,000 years ago. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake that might cost everything he cared about to wither away and die because of that man. He felt himself scowl mentally at that, for once in his life, since he had picked up his blade to protect every soul in the world of the living and that of Soul Society, he wished that his body and power was younger. Then if it was true, then there was doubt in his mind that he would have been able to kill that piece of scum once and for all. But he had failed, it was time for the young ones to be able to handle what he could not. For once since knowing the orange-haired teen, he felt himself smile at the boy's power. He had failed what he had sought himself out to do, but he finally believes with everything in his soul that Kurosaki Ichigo will not fail like he did. He suddenly felt himself chuckled, he wondered how many times in his past life did the people around him called him a failure. Someone who would never have the chance to do anything like others around him. They were nothing but memories of his past life, a life that he never wanted to remember no matter what he did. But now that he was dead again, the man once known as Uzumaki Naruto could not forget her face, the face of the one girl he loved more than anything, the one girl that he thought hated him more than anything. But it was nothing more than a lie, a scheme to have him killed, a toss away, because he was nothing more than a threat towards what they wanted. Was it wrong for him to want to see her again? That's all, it is nothing more than past memories of a previously life I once lived. Genusai Shijikuni Yamamoto mentally said to himself, not allow a single emotion to pass over his old wrinkled face. Nothing more than painful memories from the weak foolish young boy I used to be when I was once allowed to have a life. Pain, foolishness, hopeful cries of a family, betrayal. Such were the emotions of one sun-kissed blonde-haired Uzumaki Naruto, a young boy who was once too foolish to see what was coming before him. He raised his broken cerulean eyes to gaze at the people standing before him, the same people he thought was cared for him like he did for them. But it was nothing more than lies, tall tales to make him do what they wanted him to do. Their eyes were filled with nothing more than cold-filled hate and hate that this bastard had inflicted on them. Tsunade gazed down at the beaten boy in front of her, the princess of Konohaga's face was devoid of any emotion. Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, for failure of an S-ranked mission and the attempted murder of Uchiha Sasuke, you are held responsible. I, Tsunade, 5th Hokage of Konohagakure no Sado, with the agreement of the clan heads, the village council and the elders, declare you a traitor of the worst kind. You have brought shame and dishonor upon the entire village. You were ordered to capture Uchiha Sasuke and return him to Konoha. Permission was given to use force if necessary. But instead, you attempted to murder him. Furthermore, remains of the battle at the Valley of the End showed copious remnants of Kyuubi's bile chakra. For failure on your lifetime mission to contain the Kyuubi and protect Konoha, you are condemned. Have you anything to say? Naruto raised his eyes at his godmother and spat, his eyes were filled with a murderous intent that had never been seen before in his eyes. His once life-filled eyes stared darkly back at the Hokage, the woman who he thought cared about him more than anything in this village, a village that he sworn on his life that he would protect. I have done nothing wrong to deserve this treatment you have set upon me. I was ordered with several others to bring Sasuke back and I was told to use force when it was necessary. Is this how you repay me for following everything the mission was told to do? Has the village I once loved really fallen this low to punish a ninja that was doing what his Hokage ordered him to do? Giving no sign of having registered the blonde-haired teen's protests, the slug Sanin waved her hands, the Jinchuriki had been found guilty of what he has done. He shall be put to death in 3 days' time on March 28. take him away. The crowd below him said nothing, but none of them really had to say nothing, he had already known what they felt about him since he could remember. And for once in his life he did not feel anger for it, not a single emotion showed on his face as his arms were stabbed onto the wooden floor across from him. He had sworn to himself that no matter what happened to his body, that he would not allow himself to give these traitors the satisfaction of seeing his pain. I severed and protect this village faithfully with little strength I was given, he thought bitterly. And you pay me back with all I've done with nothing but pain and betrayal. I should have saw this coming, but I was too damn foolish not to look between the lines. Naruto's cell was cold, barren, empty, and filled with nothing but absolute darkness that surrounded him like a black pit. His lacerated arms hung awkwardly at his sides, hung aloft only by the chains that dug into his bloody wrist. The holding cell was large and bare. There were a dozen thick steel bars across the entrance, but there was a small door that allowed the guards in. He was standing in the middle of the cell like a lifeless corpse. The only thing that could tell he was alive was the cold emotionless hate that was burning in his eyes. His blonde hair was streaked with dirt and matted with blood, covering his buring hate-filled eyes. On the first day, due to the torture that the council had demanded that he face, Marino Ibiki and his torture and interrogation squad had entered the cell and set to work on him. By the time they left, many hours later, his ribs were fractured, one of his eyes were blinded, his skin was burnt on his left leg was broken and twisted, and he had more bruises on his body than he wished to count. But none of that mattered. He looked at their faces when they were torturing him, and he was disgusted beyond anything to see these bastards taking sick pleasure in seeing him pain. He didn't give them the pleasure they wanted though, not once during those hours did he allow any of them to hear him scream like they wanted. "You disappoint me, Naruto," a familiar voice called out. The blonde-haired teen gave no heed to it, keeping his head down to have his blonde locks covering his eyes from view. "I knew you were always going to be a failure, but I never would have thought you were capable of trying to kill your own teammate like that," said Blonde gave the silver-haired Jonin no response save for the ragged breathing of his battered body. Ada Kakashi paid him no heed, only looking at his once-called student with a look of pure disappointment in his eyes. "Attempted murder of your own teammate. Using the Rasengan, spiraling sphere, a deadly technique only to be used against enemy shinobi. The Yondaime Hokage must be rolling in his grave right now, you using his technique for such an immoral cause. You truly are a failure, Naruto, both as my student and as a shinobi of Konoha," he murmured, his voice laden with sorrow. Again Naruto saying nothing, ignoring the man he once saw as a sensei before all this happened to him. He heard Kakashi sigh and walk away. "As of today, you are no longer a student of mine or a member of Team 7. You are the worst ninja I've ever trained, and you should have never become a ninja in the first place. You betrayed me for a student that never wanted to be a part of this village," the blonde-haired teen said, his voice filled with dark fury as he looked at the retreating form of his sensei. "For that, no matter if I'm to be swallowed by the gates of hell themselves, I will never forgive you, no matter what happens to me." Naruto scanned the crowd, looking for at least one sympathetic face, one understanding soul that could at least understand what he was going through. But as he looked over the crowd, there was not a single soul that was out there for him, and he felt his heart clench in pain as that. His fellow genins, those he thought of as comrades, were absent. Were they unable to watch their comrade be falsely accused and killed? Or were they too arrogant to decide to grace them demon brat with their company when he needed them most? That honestly no longer mattered to him. His death was certain, there was no way he was going to be able to get out of this no matter what he tries to do. The only thing he could do was welcome death with open arms. Death, he smiled mentally to himself as he looked at the dark raining sky over Konohagakure no Sado. "Maybe Kami herself would at least give me the honor of having peace in the afterlife," it stormed that night. The clouds rained down on the village as if crying for the lost integrity of the once proud village of Konohagakure no Sado. Lightning cracked and thunder lit up the sky. It was dark, an outer shell of just what Uzumaki Naruto's heart was feeling. "Raise your head now, dope. Stand tall. After all, even the maggots should pay homage to the hawk that will devour them." It should be impossible really, there was not a single instant of emotion in Naruto's body as he looked up into the face of his once-called friend. But he was right before him, the same bastard that had walked away from his dying body while walking towards the village of sound. How was he here? How was it possible that this bastard was able to get into his cell like this? He felt fury building up in his chest as he looked at the raven-haired teen. But he didn't allow a bit of his fury to show on his face, he was silent and impassive as ever as he looked at the once loyal Uchiha to Konoha. He would not give the Uchiha the satisfaction of letting him see his pain. He had thought once that they were brothers, people who could relate to one another. But it was nothing more than a foolish dream, Uchiha Sasuke never wanted anything to do with him. He was just too childish to see it, hanging on to that one dream of having a friend he could care about. No response. Sasuke leaned in as lightning flashed, lighting up the lone window of his cell and illuminating an eerie shadow on his contemptuous face, no flash of regretful cries. "I thought you cared about Uchiha Sasuke. The blonde-haired teen's eyes narrowed at that, looking at the lone teen before him with a look of suspension on his face. "Do you think that question you're asking me is a little improper?" he asked through ragged breaths, finding it hard to breathe with his broken ribs. "You're Uchiha Sasuke, are you not? I have no wish for foolish jeers if that's what you want to accomplish." The raven-haired teen said nothing, only given the blonde-beaten teen before him a cold emotionless gaze. He was no longer dressed in the cloths Naruto could remember him wearing, he was dressed in an Uchiha black combat kimono, with armor as dark as night covered the top portion of it. On his back was a long katana, which color was that of an eerie blue that disgusted Naruto to no end. This bastard was nothing more than a traitor, a man that will accomplish anything he wanted, no matter what person got hurt around him. Right now, more than anything, the blonde-haired teen wished he had the strength to murder the dark-haired teen before him in cold blood. But he could not, and he hated himself for that. "I have no need for something like that," Sasuke responded, the same emotionless look on his face. Naruto snarled a bit, looking at the Uchiha before him with nothing but hate in his eyes. "Then what the hell are you doing here? What the hell do you want with nothing but scum?" He laughed at his own taunt to himself, with everything else everyone has called him, he was starting not to care once about his own life. "I have no use to look at your traitorous face. Leave now before I break from these chains and kill you where you stand." Uchiha Sasuke chuckled at that, voice filled with nothing but the darkest intent. "You really are a fool, aren't you? I should have never allowed myself to think highly of nothing more than a dope. That makes two of us, you scum," the blonde-beaten teen said with nothing but pure hatred in his voice. Leaning back a bit, the last Uchiha stood tall as he looked across the cell at his once former teammate. "I have no need to be fighting with you right now," he replied. "Then what the hell are you doing here then?" Naruto snarled darkly, "I will not repeat myself, so you better answer my question. Disrespect to someone higher than you no matter what, Uzumaki Naruto." The raven-haired teen mocked, "Well, if you really want to know why I came back to this pathetic village, is to give you some type of truthful testament before you die." He sneered a bit, "Even if you're nothing but scum, you at least deserve to know why the reason you're being put to death like a dog." The blonde-haired teen roared in rage, feeling his anger began to boil over with every word the Uchiha spoke to him. Without even trying, an intense amount of flames exploded around his body, creating a small but deep crater where his broken body was trying to keep standing. The raven-haired teen watched with a small amount of amazement, looking at the blood with a small bloodthirsty grin on his face. As soon as the flames wrapped around Naruto's body, they soon disappeared to show a heavily breathing blonde that was glaring hatefully at the Uchiha. "You really are a bit special, aren't you, Naruto?" Sasuke said, his eyes shifting into that of the famous Sharingan. His crimson eyes shined brightly in the dark room, casting a bright eerie glow around the two former friends. "As I said before, Naruto, when we fought at the Valley of the End, you will never be more special than me, no matter what you accomplish in your sorry excuse for a life. You will always be a failure, no matter what you do." Naruto struggled to break free, but his body was in no shape to even try to break free from his prison. "You fucking bastard. So this was the reason why you came back to this damn village. You wanted nothing else but to look down on me like you're better than me." The blonde-haired teen roared in fury, "I swear no matter how long it takes, I will find and kill you, even if it takes me a lifetime, even in death." "Strong words, dope, but I've already proven that I was stronger than you." Sasuke taunted, a cold look in his eyes as he stared at the blonde before him. "Even with the Kyuubi no Yoko seal in your body, you are still no match for my power. Do yourself a favor in your pitiful life and just expect it, you will never get what you want, no matter how hard you would have tried. You bastard, I swear I will kill you," Naruto swore darkly, looking at the raven-haired teen with nothing but fury in his eyes. Sasuke snorted, his arms folding across his chest as he looked at the blonde before him. "I highly doubt that, due to you being executed by the very same village you swore to protect." He smiled darkly at that, "But you want to know the funny thing? Don't you find it funny that both Kakashi and Tsunade would allow something like this to happen to you? The same Tsunade that kissed you on your forehead and gave you that necklace you're wearing at this very moment?" he asked, his crimson eyes suddenly boring no emotions whatsoever as he stared at the blonde. The blonde stirred a bit at that. His startlingly blue eyes shot sparks at Sasuke Scarlet. "How do you know about that? Only Jiraiya, Shizune, and Tsunade should know anything about that." The raven-haired teen's eyes grew colder, almost like ice-red slits that looked down on his blonde-haired teammate. "Why do I know something like that? It was far too easy when you place a powerful genjutsu on a useless scum of a woman who deserves nothing but death. It was far too easy to be able to accomplish. After I promised that fool Danzo that I would stay in the village, he helped me with placing the genjutsu on your wench of a godmother." He chuckled, a sick noise coming from his voice. "I've wished you would have seen it, both her and that fool Jiraiya was nothing more than scum that was crying like dogs that they had to condemn you. Maybe Jiraiya may be able to recover from it, but that scum of an Hokage will never be able to reach her former self again." Naruto shook with anger as he connected the dots. "You fucking bastard," he mumbled out in pure malice. "It was you. Everything that is happening to me is because of you. It seems for the first time in your life, you can be smart." Sasuke answered, the same dark tone still in his voice. "You dead, I will finally be able to do what I wish without anyone being in my way. But even with all that, it's still very stupid to see you're still in love with that pink-haired wench." He scoffed at that. "Maybe it's right for you to still love her. Scum, no matter what it is, belongs together no matter who they are." Naruto laughed at that, his voice filled with nothing but hate as the boy stand before him. "Like Haruno Sakura really cares about me. The only reason she put up with me was to use me like I was nothing more than a tool. Each time you degraded her, she would use me to make herself feel better." The dark-haired raven teen said nothing, only twisting on his heel and bursting into snakes, his soft arc laughter filling the dark cell, filling Naruto with nothing but hate. "It seems you are right, that pink-haired witch would never love you. She would rather die than follow scum around. Maybe I should use her before I truly leave this damn village." Naruto raised his head high, chin up as he looked at the darkened sky and the crowd street of Konohagakure no Sado. If he was to die, then he would go out with pride, not looking down like some weak dog would cry in front of these fools. Traitor. No, it was I who was deserted, I who was abandoned by most of the people I thought at least cared for me. Naruto opened his eyes and rubbed them with chained hands. Today was the day of his execution, a day that he was no longer afraid of. He had long since given up any sense of optimism and hoped that the village would see sense. What they thought and did to him no longer care, the only thing he could do is make sure he died with some type of pride still in his body. Suddenly he heard the tramp of feet approaching his cell, he snorted at that, thinking it was nothing else but more villagers or ninja that came to taunt him for things he had never done to any of them. "Here he is. Be quick about it," hissed one voice, a guard, nervously. "Yes," said a second voice, quietly. The door to his cell creaked open and he looked up to see soft lavender irises staring back at him, trembling with barely contained tears. "Naruto-kun." The blonde-haired teen shifted himself into a better standing position to glare hatefully at the pale-eyed Hyuga. If he was going to be mocked again, he might as well save himself a shred of pride, dignity and stand tall. "What the hell do you want, Hyuga? Have you come here to jeer like the rest of the scum as well? Well then, no need to hold back is all. I remember Kakashi and that bastard Sasuke expressing themselves quite poetically. Hell, even small children had memorable words. Come, see if you can top them." Hinata flinched at his harsh words and collapsed onto her knees, sobbing. Her shoulders shook violently and Naruto was racked with a sense of guilt. Perhaps he had been too harsh on her. After all, Hinata had never really made fun of him before. He reached out a hand to pat her on her shoulder, but froze. His eyes suddenly narrowed and he looked down at the lavender-haired girl with a hard cold look in his eyes. This was no time to feel weak and pity just because she was crying in front of him, he had no use for it, no matter what happened to him now. "Tell me, Hinata," he spoke, his words as cold as ice as he looked down at her. "What was the reason you came here? I've never really spoken to you since the Chunin exams, and that was only twice. The way I see it, you have not one reason to be here." Then Naruto-kun she started, but stopped when a hiccup racked her feminine frame. She set her lips in a thin line and willed her tears to stop flowing. Her last words with her love weren't going to be with her being a sobbing reek. "Naruto-kun, please forgive me." It was Naruto's turn to flinch. Those two words had never been spoken to him before, they were as rare as 3 other words. But he didn't need to allow himself to show emotions, he couldn't allow himself to go back to the childish boy he was that wished everyone would recognize him. "Your words seem very improper to me, Hinata, what are you trying to tell me?" Hinata's tears ran anew despite her best efforts to still them, marking a shining river down her pale cheeks. I'm sorry. I should have been stronger, I should have been there for you, I should have stopped them somehow, I should have." With each word she spoke, Naruto felt his entire body becoming colder and colder. The way she was right now, the way her body was shaking for someone like him, it was so clear to him it was foolish not to see it. "Hinata, for your sake of not getting hurt, you've bet not be trying to tell me what I think you're trying to say." Again the lavender girl flinched, her face choked with nothing but tears as she willed herself with all her strength to look the blood-haired shinobi in the eyes. "And Naruto-kun, for a long time now, I've she stopped again, then scrunching up her face, blurted out, "I love you, Naruto-kun." They dropped her face into her hands and wept. Naruto was shocked, but it didn't show on his face as he looked at the girl crumbled on the ground inches away from him. It was clear to see, she had always been the one that was too scared to talk to him, the one that had always looked at him from afar, even when all he wanted was someone to talk to. His mind began to rear back in a good state of mind and his cold anger began to boil over. This damn woman kneeling before him could not be doing this right now mere hours away from his execution. "Tell me, why would you love someone like me?" the blonde-haired teen asked, looking at the pale-eyed girl below him. "I'm the village parish. No one likes me and I'm even being killed just to prove a point. Why me of all people? The blue-eyed Jinchuriki frowned darkly. Because Hinata strengthened herself up and grabbed onto Naruto's hand and leaned in to give him a chaste kiss on the lips, surprising herself with her own boldness. Maybe it was because she had nothing to lose. You're always so strong, you never let anything depress you. You lift me up when I'm down. You are my light when I'm left in nothing but darkness. You are my inspiration and I love you. And no matter if you die today, I'll always remember you. The blonde-haired shinobi stared at the girl before him for a moment, trying to find anything that would make him doubt what she was saying, but he could not find a single emotion of dispassion in her eyes. He smirked a bit, his head falling towards the ground and hung lifelessly. Get out now, he spoke, not daring to look her in the eyes. Just leave now Hinata, before I do something I'm going to regret for the rest of my few hours I have to live. Hinata chalked up tears, she could feel her heart breaking the more she stood here. She was afraid of this happen, the man she loved more than anything breaking from what he was due to what they had done to him. Please Naruto-kun, she chalked out, everything I've done is full of regret. I wish I would have talked to you, helped you through the loneliness that you've lived with for so long. A chuckle passed through his lips, he raised his head and tilted it to the side, his blonde lock falling over his eyes to give him an even darker look. You love me? He said, his voice dark. Then tell me Hinata, from what I'm seeing, you have loved me for years even before I've talked to you at the Chunin exams. If you loved me and knew what I was going through, why did you at least try to talk to me? What would have been so much strength to talk to me? Hinata flinched at his harsh words, feeling her entire body getting weaker with every minute that passed. What he was saying was right, she should have been stronger, she should have helped him a long time ago when he needed it the most. But she didn't because she allows herself to be too weak to finally do something for her, to grab something she wanted for a long time now. You're right, everything you have said is true, I'm so sorry Naruto-kun, if only I was stronger to at least talk to you. He even scoffed, not having a shred of love or kindness within his body. I will not say it again Hinata, he glared at her, allowing his anger to take control over everything he was feeling. As you said, you were too weak to grab what you wanted. If you truly wanted to help me, and if you truly loved me like you said, then you would have talked to me. Even the weak have the courage to talk to the person they care about, but you were too scared of what the star was going to give you, so you did not reach for it. Hinata shook her head, trying desperately to deny everything that was being said to her. That isn't true, leave. He growled out, his eyes narrowing into cold crimson slits. This village and you mean nothing to me. I will be dead in a couple of hours, but I will die with pride. I will not allow your selfish need to tell me you love me to weight me down. Leave now Hyuga Hinata, and never allow yourself to think about me again. I was forsaken by all, my life tossed aside like used up flames, by the one person I thought of as a brother. How foolish, how naive of me to ever think he was anything to me other than an enemy that was building up to strike me down. You're nothing but scum for saying something like that, Baka. The voice hissed, filled with a small amount of fury, but what confused him the most was that he could feel sadness in the air as well. From where he was standing, Naruto cast his gaze upward and saw a mop of pink hair before him. For some odd reason, he felt himself laughed at the girl that was standing before him. Out of everyone he thought would want to see him, he never would have thought she would come to see him. The only woman he knew was still loyal to Uchiha Sasuke. No matter what that bastard did to everyone around him, he knew she would never see him in the wrong. Disgusting, there was no other's words to call her but that. They must want me to suffer greatly, don't they? He asked himself, not even bothering to look his pink-haired bitch of a teammate in the face. So, to make this quick, what do you want with me, Haruno? It was small, but he grinned darkly when he saw her flinched. She loved you more than anything you know. The pink-haired member of Team 7 said. What was the reason you had to say words as harsh as that to someone who cared for you? That rich coming from a bitch like you, the blonde-haired shinobi spat. You care for no one, not even your own fucking parents. The only person you care about is that bastard Sasuke. Not a single person is on your mind other than him. Sakura stepped back a bit, her face clenching together in pain at the words she had just heard. Everything her blonde-haired teammate was saying was true, she was nothing more than scum in the eyes of everyone and everything that came around her. Why? What was the reason on why she treated him like she did before? He had been nothing but kind to her even when Sasuke never even gave her the time of day. She was scum, a piece of dirt who deserved nothing but to wither away like a scoffed-out flame. She stepped forward, looking at Naruto with a weak look on her face. Yes, you are correct, Naruto. She said, her voice trying to lose emotion within it. If you're scum for telling Hinata something like that, then I'm more so than you. I deserve nothing more than to be dragged down and killed, to be tossed away like a dark soul. Naruto growled at her words, feeling angry that she would even say something like that. What the fuck are you trying to tell me? He suddenly laughed, are you trying to say you're feeling sorry for what you've brought? Or are you trying to make amends for that bastard Sasuke? He chuckled darkly, how typical of his loyal bitch to come here to beg for his forgiveness. Sakura shook her head, feeling tears began to leak from her eyes. The pink-haired girl was trying hard not to cry, but seeing her teammate like this was hurting her more than she liked. He had always been a sort of light within Team 7, now that light was no more, it was nothing more than a hateful man that stood before her. The way he was all her fault, not a single thing in her body was going to make her think anything different. If she was just stronger, if she would have never begged him to bring Sasuke back to the Leaf Village, then maybe none of this would have happened. Blame me. Looking up, the blonde-haired teen looked at the pink-haired girl with a look of confusion on his face. What the hell are you talking about? Blame you for what? He jerked forward, leaving the chains that bound him to rattle like glass. Blame you for this? No, I've planned myself forever allow myself to trust any of you damn bastards. Sakura stepped forward, but stepped back a bit as she heard the blonde before her snarl at her in hate and rage. She welcomed all of it with open arms, knowing that everything he did to her would be something that she deserved more than anyone. Blame me, Naruto. If it wasn't for me, if I was stronger than I am now, then I would have never allowed you to go on that mission. If I wasn't so obsessed with Sasuke then you wouldn't have to suffer like this, if I would have just seen the sign of Sasuke before all this, then. She sobbed a bit but held it in as she stared her teammate directly in the eyes. You wouldn't have to suffer, you wouldn't have to go through something like this. Naruto shifted a bit, stepping back a bit as he could feel his anger beginning to boil over. Leave now you damn scum, he sneered darkly at her. You're right, everything you just said was right on the mark. Maybe if you would have saw what that bastard Uchiha was then maybe none of this would be happen, but you did because you were so fucking stupid not to see what was right in your face. He scoffed, his crimson red eyes glaring at the pink-haired girl with nothing but hate in his eyes. But you couldn't because you were so in love with him as you say, he spat. Sakura nodded, walking closer towards him. You're right, but shift all your hate towards me. She said. The others, none of them deserve it. Me and Sasuke, we were the ones that did this to you. Leave now Haruno. The blonde-haired shinobi said, feeling his rage almost breaking out. He was trying to control it as hard as he could, but he was losing it the more she stood before him. Leave now before I kill you where you stand. But she didn't leave, she stood where she was with the same look on her face. She was cut off as a powerful shockwave slammed into her body, lifting her up and slamming into the wall behind her. She cried out in pain, but screamed in immense pain as a bar of the cell stabbed into her right arm. Her pain, the one thing she wanted to feel for what she had didn't stop. A second later a piece of metal slammed into her left eye, causing her to cry out in pain as well. Naruto looked on with pleasure, feeling his insanity began to slip after everything he's gone through. I wonder how it feels Haruno Sakura. He sneered, asking for forgiveness from me when you know you don't deserve any of it. If you can stand, leave no before I finish what I started. Shifting on the ground where she crumbled, Sakura struggled to pull the pipe out of her arm, pain racking her body which she never felt before in her life. She could no longer see from her left eyes, she could already see this from how much damage the eye had taken. Gritting her teeth, she screamed as she pulled the pipe out her right arm with all the strength she could muster. She felt weak, but she gathered what strength she had left and pulled the shard out of her eyes. Everything I deserve every pain you want to inflict on me. The pink-haired girl said, struggling to pick herself up from where she was. I had every chance to be able to talk to you, be able to help you when no one else would. But I was too blind and stupid to see what I was doing, and for that Naruto I am truly sorry. I don't want your fucking pity, the blonde-haired teen spat out with hate. Just do yourself a favor and leave before you die. The pink-haired girl didn't listen to him, she only slowly walked towards him as best as she could, not even bothered by how much blood she was losing. Naruto looked on, feeling the anger in his body began to leave him as he kept his gaze on the pink-haired girl before him. He knew something was wrong here, this was something that he never thought Sakura would do. So why? What was the reason why she was risking her life to take in his pain? You're going to die today, Sakura said, leaning close as she could towards him. The blonde-haired teen didn't move, looking down at the girl on his body with a confused expression on his face. But, even if you are gone and forgotten this day, I will not allow myself to forget what you did for me. Even when he couldn't, you risked your life to save me from Gaara when you had no reason to do so. She chuckled a bit, her face full of tears as she did so. I'm really empathetic, aren't I? It took me this long to say thank you to the person that saved my life. Something was truly wrong with this girl, he had never known Sakura to be this reckless, she was terribly wounded and her left eye might never be able to see the light of day again. Even with all the threat he threw her way, the wound she suffered by him, she still had the will and courage to tell him what she was feeling about the way he was. She was truthful, telling him nothing but the realest things that was going on through her heart. His anger was losing his will over him again, and he began to feel a bit of regret as he looked into her one emerald green eye. Sakura-chan, he mumbled, keeping his gaze on hers and nothing else. Just leave, you suffered enough. I know what you're trying to say, you don't need to say another damn word, do you? She asked, raising her hand to gentle careless his face. From the expression on your face, you might think I'm trying to say that I love you, right? She shook her head. As you said before, I'm nothing but scum, a person who does not deserve anything more than pain. Right now, I know nothing of what love is for another person, and I don't deserve it after what I've done to you. She stepped back, looking at him with the same small smile on her face. I know you will never forgive me, so I'll never ask you to give it to me. She wrapped her fingers around the necklace of the first Hokage. For a moment she looked up to see his reaction, but the blonde-haired shinobi didn't move an inch. He had an impassive look on his face, but she could see a small bit of confusion in his eyes. She softly took the necklace from around his neck just before placing it around hers. The smile didn't move from her face. She turned head limp towards the cell door. Just before she walked out, she looked back at him with a small sad smile on her face, her tears covering most of her face. She looked at the necklace around her neck before looking back towards the blonde-haired teen. I'll keep this for you, this will allow me to remember my sin. All this pain I caused you, this will make me remember everything I did. She said, her voice holding nothing but deep sorrow in it. It may not mean anything to you, but I will get stronger, and what Sasuke did to you. He will pay. But those words said, she turns around and left, leaving Naruto in a state of shock confusion. For the first time since he fell in love with her, she had left him in a state of shock and confusion. She had done something that no one else did when they came to see him. She had spoken truthful words towards him, trying to tell her what she was feeling at the moment. For the first time in a long time, Uzumaki Naruto truly felt himself cry, not just for himself, but for the 2 lives he just might have ruined. More than anything, memories of a dead man mean nothing to me. I was nothing more than a worthless waste of space that had been used for a purpose. The old Shinigami thought bitterly, surprised a bit that he could even feel anything when he was dead. He shouldn't be feeling like this. He had lived a great life when he entered Soul Society. He had protected his home with everything he had. It was his time to go. After 3,000 years of fighting, he would finally be able to rest in peace. I'm sorry Shizukuni Yamamoto, but your time is not yet to come. An enteral voice said, seemingly filled with wisdom that seems to even pass his years of service. The former Satacho of the Gate 13's eyes snapped open, his dark brown eyes taking on a reddish hue as he looked around his surroundings. For some odd reason, his body seems to be still floating in the open space that stood before him. Still, for some odd reason, something kept him from frowning in anger, as though this was natural. Suddenly he felt his head hit water. He continued to fall as though he was soaring through the air. As he neared the rapidly approaching ground, he began to slow. He took it upon himself to straighten his body. Genryusai Yamamoto took a deep breath and was surprised that he could breathe at all, even though he did allow it to show on his wrinkled face. He looked down at his body with a frown on his face, feeling weird that he was cut in half like he was before his body was destroyed by that bastard Iwich. The Satacho scowled at that, feeling anger at himself for not ended that man 1,000 years ago when he had the chance. But for now, all he could do was hope that Kurosaki Ichigo had enough power to end what he started. Tossing those thoughts aside for a moment, he looked around him to see nothing more than darkness for miles. He looked down to see that he was standing on a strange black surface. He took a step forward and tensed as thousands of white doves suddenly broke away the darkness on the strange platform he was standing on, revealing a circular, stained glass platform. He felt something odd, like a familiar feel of Ryatsu above him. Looking up, his right eye snapped open in surprise to see a great golden phoenix, with eyes of red flames. The phoenix above him looked exactly like that of the Sakyoku, but for some reason he could not tell how that was possible. Suddenly, without any warning whatsoever, a flame seems to flicker to life in the distances. The old man tense up, his right hand going straight for Ryujin Zangetsu, the blade that had been by his side for as long as he could remember. He suddenly chuckled, feeling the irony for what was going through his mind at the moment. This place he was now currently at, it had to be nothing else other than that of hell itself. How fitting for him of all people to be placed here. If it was truth, then he wasn't going to allow anything to kill him without a fight. He was going to show them just why he was the most powerful Shinigami to ever walk through Soul Society. It never amazes me, but you have always been one to be quick in decisions. Haven't you, Shizukuni? The same voice said, full of wisdom. Yamamoto tense up more, looking towards the sliver-white flame that seems to glow even brighter than before. He stood straight, his eyes narrowing into slits as he looked at the flame before him. Who are you? Yamamoto ordered, his right hand gripping tightly around Ryujin Zangetsu's hilt. If you wish to speak to me, then show yourself now. The voice chuckled, which annoyed the old Shinigami more than he wished. I see, the last time we have talked was over 2,000 years ago, just before you were able to grasp the power of your Zanpakuto. The voice said with amusement, but I must say. I'm a bit sad that you do not remember me, old friend. Yamamoto's eyes widened in shock, feeling his entire body tense up as he looked at the flames before him. What he was thinking could be true. There was no way that this could be the Spirit King of all things. If it was him, then why would he call him here? His service has been long filled with everything he had accomplished. He trained 2 students who can take care of the Gate better than he ever could, and so what was the reason why he was called before him? He shook his head and allowed his body to fall on one knee. Sorry for my rudeness, I meant no disrespect whatsoever. The old Shinigami said, keeping his eyes focused on the sliver-white flame before him. The voice of the Spirit King chuckled again, there is no need for that my friend. He replied with a small chuckle. For as long as I can remember my friend, I have watched you serve the Gate 13 with everything you have. It is now time for me to do something for you, I just hope you are ready for it my friend. End chapter 1. Onto the story. Like a raging fire. Ready for what Yamamoto said to himself, his small dark brown eyes narrowed into slits as he looked at the sliver-white flame in the darkness before him. What does it mean by something like that? I'm already dead, so what else could I be ready for other than entral slumber? The Spirit King before him said nothing, the flame just flickered brighter before a flash of bright light suddenly consumed the entire area around him. The old powerful Shinigami frowned slightly at this as his old eyes adjusting to the light, like it was no more than a small insect that wouldn't stop bothering him. A few seconds later the bright light fading, revealing a dark forest that looked highly familiar to the old Shinigami. Looking around, his eyes snapped open in shock as seeing the forest on where his foolish life as a ninja had started. Even though he didn't let it show on his face, he was getting angry and remembering something like this, a time where he was nothing more than a child who was asking for too much, which no a single person in that damn village wanted to give him. He somewhat hated this forest. He recognized it instantly the moment the Spirit King seems to want to show it to him. After all, it was in this forest that he began his journey as a shinobi, a life which was filled with nothing but regret and many mistakes. The same forest where his first instructor Iruka had given him his headband after being able to beat a shocked Mizuki. However, even as he watched, the scene faded away and piece by piece remade itself into a familiar bloody scene that he was proud of, the very same scene where his first 13 soldiers fought against the Quinces. The scene was nothing more than a bloody scene out of one's nightmare, filled with bloody bodies of people who were dressed in familiar clothes of the Vandenreich. But to him, it was a scene of pure beauty, one that a warrior of the blade was proud to be of, no matter how hard one tried to bury those feelings in their heart. He on the other hand wasn't going to hide none of his emotions, he was too old to even try to do something as foolish as it. It wasn't that he enjoyed killing, this scene just reminded him of the reason why he had chosen to pick up his Zanpakuto, his Ryujin Zanka to turn to ash anything that stood in his way to protect the souls that couldn't protect themselves. He clenched onto the ground, causing him to turn to stare at the 13 figures that were walking on the blooded field like gods of death. He couldn't be more proud. 1,000 years ago, when the Gate 13 had not been formed, these 12 men and women had been the ones he had called his brothers sisters, his comrades in arms who would die for the cause of protect what they thought was right. Each and every last one of them, changing themselves into nothing more than murder's devils, to make sure that it was safe for others who couldn't fight to walk in peace. He felt a small smile spread over his face, during those times, he could truly say that he had felt more alive than anything in the world. Shinobi, to his understand, could never hope to feel something like this, the pride of holding one's honor was the greatest thing a samurai or warrior of the blade could feel. When he had discarded himself as a shinobi of Konoha, of Uzumaki Naruto, he had sworn to himself that he would never discard the ways of the blade. Having fun my old friend? Taking a walk down memory lane are you? The old Shinigami turned slightly, looking at a sliver-white figure made of nothing but flames. The flame-like figure of the Spirit King stopped on his side, watching the scene before him as well like two old men who were remembering lost times. Even though this scene had been the darkest of Soul Society's history, this was one of the greatest scenes each of them could be proud of. I was proud you know, Genryusai Yamamoto said his voice solemn but filled with unmatched pride. Serving under you gave me a chance to be something greater, far greater than I've ever been when I was alive as a shinobi of Konohagakure no Sado. I have some things I regret even in that life as a Shinigami, but I was far happier than I could ever have been if I lived in the shinobi nations. The Spirit King turned slightly towards the old Shinigami, his face holding the same solemn but prideful look. I know Shijikuni, and I could not have asked for a better solider to protect the place I called my own. He nodded a bit, his finger pointing towards the 12 figures standing with a younger stronger Yamamoto. Not just you either, those 12 you order has made me proud everything I see this scene of what all of you sought to protect. He held up his hand a bit, snapping his fingers, and a figure suddenly stood before the two old warriors. Yamamoto's eyes narrowed into tight slits, feeling a strong urge of disgust coming over him as he looked at the person standing before him. It was him, but not the him he wanted to remember, the him that was standing before him was dressed in the clothes of the dream he once held a long time ago. He had bright sun-kissed blonde hair, cerulean blue eyes, and 3 whisker marks etched on each side of his face. However, he wasn't dressed in his standard disgusting jumpsuit that screamed kill me from a long distance away, but a white kimono embroidered with the symbol for fire. There was no headband on his forehead, but his hand held a certain triangular hat, the Hokage's hat which he remembered Sarutobi wearing. Yamamoto tensed a bit and brought a hand to his head, wincing imperceptibly. The Spirit King frowned, waving his hand to break the image away like flickering lights. I'm sorry my old friend, even though it angers you to show you something like that, it was needed to be done. Shifting a small but short glare at the kami of all existence, Yamamoto's face went back into the hard look he usually wears. And why is that my king? He asked, a once of anger in his voice as he looked at his side at the Spirit King. What could be the reason for showing me this? I have long been in service to you. I have done everything you have asked of me. I have lived my life to the fullest extent than what I could ever hope for when I was alive as a shinobi of Konoha. What is it that you truly need of me to do? The Spirit King smiled, looking at the old man before him like a father does to one of his own sons. Genryusai Shijikuni Yamamoto had always done everything in his ability to become the strongest Shinigami of his times, pushing past the limit of everything that once held him back when he was alive as Uzumaki Naruto. He was no longer that childish boy he used to be, this was a man that would do anything before him to make sure that both Soul Society and that of the world of the living was protected. He had done all he had asked of him, his time as the Sateicho of the entire was over, but his legacy would never be snuffed out. Those he left behind will continue his legacy, he smiled a bit as he pictured the tall figure of an orange-haired teen. I am your king, and a king must know all of his subjects. This, as of what you have just seen, was the form of one of your deepest desires. You, in the Hokage's robes ruling over a village that has accepted you for who you are. The king explained, looking at Yamamoto with a calm gaze in his eyes. The old Shinigami frowned, yes you are corrected about that my king. That was the form of which I always wanted when I was nothing more than a child. But I have no desire to become the Hokage of Konohagakure no Sado, I have let that desire go, there is nothing in my heart that would even think to want something like that. As straight to the point as always, I see. The Ryo, Spirit King, said, his voice gaining a humor tone to it. Even if he wanted to show sadness towards one of his greatest friends and warriors, he would not allow himself to do so. If he did, then he would show nothing more than the utmost disrespect to his soldiers that has served him faithfully for a long time. You are known as the most powerful Shinigami to walk over Soul Society, fear only next to me. Even now, even after years after your death towards Iwich, you are still well respected and feared towards others. The powerful Shinigami's head turned slightly, looking at the Spirit King with a hard expression on his face. What do you mean years my king? He asked, a bit confused in what was being said to him. How long have I been dead? Ryo smiled slightly, you've been dead for 3 years, and in those years you have been in a deep peaceful sleep that you deserve, and far more than even that. He suddenly frowns, a dark expression coming over his face. I apologize my friend, it was not my intention to have Uzumaki Naruto leave the world so soon. There was so much in store for you. I had so many plans, you had so much potential. I underestimated the magnitude of the prejudice humans can put through. Yamamoto shook his head a bit, a small smile crossing over his face. There is no need for you to apologize to me my king. You did what you had to. Your decisions are that of fate, if it was my destiny to die that day, then I have nothing to be angered about. My life as a Shinigami is something I will never forget or regret, for the first time in my life since I was Uzumaki Naruto, I was content. The Spirit King nodded, the small frown still edged on his face. Even so my friend, having your life in like that was something I never wanted to put you through. He shook his head, my words before were much improper and might be confusing to you. That day, on March 28, you were supposed to die, but never like that. Yamamoto's eyes narrowed, looking at his king with a dark expression on his face. What do you mean by that? He asked. As I said, you were never supposed to die like you were that day Yamamoto. The Spirit King replied, his own voice growing dark. He flared his arm in front of his body, the scene before them changing to show a man dressed in a dark cloak with red clouds on it, on his face was a spiral dark orange mask. It was this man, this scum that changed everything I had planned for you in the world of shinobi. Yamamoto said nothing at first, only staring at the figure before him with an impassive look on his face. The figure before him didn't look that special to him, only a weak fool who seemed to find pleasure in hiding his face behind a mask. To me, he looks extremely weak. Was the short reply he gave, something that was unusually for him to do, but looks can be deceiving. The Spirit King nodded, yes. This was the man who changed your life since the first moments you were born. Yamamoto's eyes narrowed even further with that, since my birth. Are you saying he's the reason why my parents weren't there for me during this time? The Spirit King smiled a bit at that, in all honesty I thought you would have hated your parents for leaving you along. He chuckled a bit, but I should never underestimate someone of your character my friend. The old powerful Shinigami smirked at that, yes my king, but what does this man have to do with my parents? He asked. The Spirit King snarled a bit, a dark expression going over his face. I'm sorry my friend, but during the time of your lift as Uzumaki Naruto, I was nothing more than a fool who put too much on a child of all things. His arm flared again, and Yamamoto's eyes narrowed into fury as he looked at the figure before him. It was Uchiha Sasuke, the bastard that had ended his life all those years ago, but it looked like he was far older than he was from what he could remember. The figure before him looked like a full-grown adult, one that was too close to resembles to that of Uchiha Sasuke than the old Shinigami could like. His black raven hair was waist-length with shoulder-length bangs framing the side of his face, covering most of his right eyes. Under his eyes were more prominent creases had developed under eyes of his eyes. Over his clothes, he wore the traditional armor. The armor of the Senju clan was constructed from numerous metal plates, formed into multiple protective guards along his body, in particular. Chest, waist, shoulders and thighs. Under the armor, his clothing was accompanied by an indigo long-sleeved shirt, boots and gloves, as well as Konoha's indigo forehead protector. On his back was an orange-colored fan which had a long black chain running up it, in addition to having white bandages wrapped around the handle on his back that had a black Mitsudama pattern, colored bright red, in both of the top corners. Why are you showing me this? Yamamoto asked, his tone even as ever. Because of these two, or more in precise, that of Uchiha Madara, your life would never had to be ripped from your parents. The Spirit King replied, they wanted the Kyuubi no Yoko which was sealed in your mother during the time. The only reason they did not obtain it was because of the noble sacrifice your father, Namikaze Minato, took to make sure you were still able to live. So, what I thought was true. Yamamoto said, his tone taking on a soft tone. My father really was a great man, along with my mother as well. You do not hate them? And why should I? The old Shinigami snorted mentally at that. His father must have been pushed to come up with a decision like that. Not a single father would want to put a burden like that upon any child of theirs. Even though he didn't know much of his father, he was proud of his father, the Yondaime Hokage, who protects his home village as best as he could. His mother as well, he knew from what he was feeling right now that his mother tried everything she could to protect him, no matter how much pain she had to go through. They did what they had to my kind, and I will not hate them for something that even I might have done to save my home. Yes, you are correct my friend. The Spirit King nodded, but a frown was edging back onto his face. But, do you wish to pay them back for what they have done? Do you wish to exact your revenge on them for taking away the chance you had to live with your parents? Yamamoto shook his head at that, standing tall as he looked at the two figures before them. Revenge is sometimes petty, and even if Uchiha Sasuke took it too far, him as a reason to want to exact his revenge on a man that took everything away from him. He sighed a bit, I do not wish to become like that man, no boy who wants to kill everyone that stands in his way. You are wise beyond your years Shijikuni. I have no wish to return to Konohagakure no Sado. I have lived a full life as Genryusai Shijikuni Yamamoto. I had a purpose when I was serving as a Teicho of the Gate 13, I fought with honor and pride. He closed his eyes at that, a long tired sigh passing through his lips. All I wish to do is sleep, nothing else. The Spirit King closed his eyes a bit, a long sigh passing through his lips. What the man standing at his side was true, his life as a Shinigami was one that not a single one should regret. With every battle he fought, he never backed down from anything that stood before him. He was glad, happy that Genryusai was able to live a life to his fullest after the mistake he had made. But even so, those two had messed up everything he had planned for Uzumaki Naruto, but they gave him a chance to give that same boy a chance to grow stronger than he ever could be. He glanced at the man at his side, Genryusai Shijikuni Yamamoto was Uzumaki Naruto, but he was far better. The shinobi nations needed him, a person who would not hesitate in the slightest to erase anything that stood in the way of true peace into ashes. Konohagakure no Sado also needed him, ever since the death of Uzumaki Naruto, everything that village had stood for no longer was there. They needed a real leader, not a leader who was too corrupt to know what it was to lead soldiers into battle without sacrificing them like lambs. It was time to set things right from the mistakes he has made over the years. This man standing on his side was the only person he could trust, a person he knew that would not fail him no matter what the cost. I'm sorry my friend, but before you are able to gain the peace you so rightfully deserve, I have one more mission for you to carry out. The Spirit King commanded, his tone taking on that of a king. The powerful Shinigami sighed a bit, already feeling where this was going. His king, the person he had served for a long time now, wanted him to go back to that of the elemental nations. He never wanted to see that place again, but if his king wished it to be so, then he had no other choices but to follow through with it. Maybe, in a small part of his heart, he will be able to mine together the broken bonds he once held with his former genin. His eyes steel and his Ryatsu flared to life a bit, but first he had to remove those two from what they did to his parents. He turned on his heel, looking at his king with a cold determination growing on his face and speared. What is it that my king needs? The old Shinigami asked, his right hand on his chest. The Spirit King smiled mentally, but his face was kept into a tight frown. You have served me faithfully for a long time, my friend, you are a soul leader that any king would be proud of. He announced, pride in each word he spoke. I only ask of one thing, destroy. Those two men that have taken away the only chance you had with your parents, I want you to leave nothing of them in that dimension. The old Shinigami raised an eyebrow at that, are you asking me? Yes, the Spirit King spoke darkly, his voice holding nothing but a strong dislike in it. I want you to leave no trace of them, destroy everything there is of their souls, along with anyone else that dares follow those two. Yamamoto nodded, his right fist clenching tightly on his chest. Yes, my king. He said, his voice taken on a darker tone as well. I will burn to ashes everyone that you have ordered me to do, not a single one of them will dare escape from me. The Spirit King nodded, a small smile falling onto his face. I know my soul leader, but first. He waved his hand, and an intense amount of sliver white flames suddenly covered his arm. I grant a wish to help you with your quest. Even though you are strong as you are, I want you at your absolute best to bring about my orders, my soul leader. He pointed his left arm towards the old Shinigami, and a second later the sliver white flames covered Yamamoto's entire form. Seconds later, it vanished, showing a form of Genryusai Shijikuni Yamamoto that hasn't been seen for over 2,000 years. Your body, the one you had when you were at your best, is the only gift I can really give you, my friend. He smirked a bit, just with a few modifications. It has been a long time, a very long time since he had ever felt so full on energy like he was feeling right now. His eyes snapped open, looking towards the Spirit King with a determined expression on his face, one that hasn't been shown for a long time. He looked down to see that the left arm he had lost when trying to kill Sasuke's and was back, fresh when the skin of a strong youthful man so full of life. He was dressed in a standard Shinigami uniform, its size fitting him greatly. On his back, he could feel the familiar weight of the white Haori of the First Division draped over his back. Looking towards his eyes, he frowns a bit at seeing what he had truly looked like. It honestly was the same form he could remember from over 2,000 years ago, but only with a bit of modifications that was done. His hair was long as it used to be, flaring outwards towards his lower back, but was tied up to give him a long ponytail. His bangs were long, reaching towards his chin and covering his eyes a bit. But what irritated him a bit was that his black hair had sun-kissed blonde streaks going through it, along with his eyes being the color of a deep cerulean blue. But he smiled mentally, feeling the familiar weight of Ryujin Zangetsu at his left side of his sash. You are Genryusai Shijikuni Yamamoto, you took that name as the new life you lived as a Shinigami. The spirit spoke, causing the now young Yamamoto to look at him. But you are also still Uzumaki Naruto, son of Namikaze Minato and Kushina Uzumaki, and godson of Toad Sage Jiraiya and Senju Tsunade. One of tragic life, the other life full of pride of honor. To fill out your mission I have given you, there must be some piece of Uzumaki Naruto on you, my friend. Yamamoto nodded, clenching his fist in acceptance. Uzumaki Naruto and I are one. I was born from his failures and childish dreams, and he was born from my hope of a full life. Even if I wanted to, I could not separate us. I will return as Genryusai Shijikuni Yamamoto, as this form you have given me is more fitting, but neither will Uzumaki Naruto disappear. He bowed in gratitude, feeling a bit at peace with himself. Arigato, my king. The Spirit King laughed a bit, shaking his head. There is no need for that, my friend, just do what my will is command. His face grew a bit dark. Do you know of Akatsuki? Yamamoto frowned at the familiar name, feeling a small bit of anger in his soul build up in his chest. Even if it has been a long time, there was no way he could have forgotten that organization that wanted him for Biju that was sealed in his body by his father. He remembered that he wanted to go after them, trying to act tough due to the helplessness he felt when he saw Uchiha Tachi beat Uchiha Sasuke like he was nothing more than a mere infant. His godfather had scowled him, telling him that he would have been nothing more than an easy target for them if he would have went after them. It was truth, but times has changed now, they were going to be nothing more than easy targets for him this time around. What of them, my king? Destroy them. The Spirit King said, his voice so dark that it would have scared any lesser man. That organization follows those two men like nothing but mere pawns, leave nothing left of their souls in the cycle. Every person you are to destroy will come to you, my friend, it will come to you when you are close to them. Do not fail me, my soldiers. Wither away all to ashes that stand before you. Light flared around the Spirit King, casting a light as bright as the sun itself. The black-haired Shinigami stood tall, his body being compressed into a small sphere of Ryatsu. His king, the man that had given him a better life as a Shinigami, had spoken, and he wasn't going to fail him no matter how hard it was. He was no longer that weak child that could do nothing more than shout out a dream, his was now a powerful soul leader who would fulfill his king's wish at any cost. Nothing was going to stop him, and everything before him was going to know the reason why he was called the Guardian of Hell. Elemental Nations Dimension. Unknown location. Genryusai Shijikuni Yamamoto formed piece by piece, his young form around the age of early 20, building itself together in the dimension he never thought he would see again. It was an interesting feeling, not unlike when his body had been bifurcated by a witch. His conscience had spread far and wide before being gathering into the familiar form of a very young appearance of the Satacho of the Gate 13. His body finished reforming and he immediately swooned and clutched his head. Even if he had been given a new left arm and his old young body, before he had died, he had still be cut clean in half. Shifting a bit with a frown on his face, he scanned his surroundings to get a good bearing on where he was. He was in a desert not like that of Waco Mundo, but far more brighter and warmer than the home of Hollows. The lands were scorched by the blazing sun, which seemed to loom above him, larger than anything within that of Waco Mundo. Pale, granular sand stretched as far as he could see, marred only by a pale, bare trees jutting out in randomly in the landscape. Shijikuni Yamamoto drank in the sight, not quite believing that he had returned, that he was back in the land, which he was nothing more than a child with wild dreams. He shook his head, returning to the things in his mind that truly matter at the moment. Again he looked over his body, a deep frown going over his face as replayed everything that had happened to him after he was given the chance to reawaken by his king. His was given an order, a mission to completely annihilate any there was that those two men had pushed their hands into. He still frowned at that, wondered just how it was possible for Uchiha Madara to be able to live that long to influence anyone to carry out his orders. Human lives were unique, but that could nowhere near live as long as a Shinigami. So how was it still possible for him to still be alive? He didn't like it, something to him just didn't really seem to add up. First, before he did anything to carry out his king's wishes on this world, he had to give out a gauge on where his Ryatsu was. He knew from experience that his power was destructive, so from what he could tell, the Spirit King might have given him a stronger body, but his Ryatsu might not be on the levels he was when he was around this age. Right now, from what he could tell from the way his body was feeling and acting, he was around a good 700 or 900 years old, an age where he could remember he was at his absolute strongest. But honestly it didn't feel like that to him at the moment. It wasn't that he was weak right now, he just felt that he had the same level of power he had when he died against that bastard Scummiwitch. He grinned darkly at that, a bit of his old personally coming back at full force when he was young. No matter, if he did have that current level of power, then it was more than enough to deal with anything the shinobi nations had for him. This was no time for playing around or trying to meet old friends that did care for him, he wasn't here for any of that. The kill being the only mission that his king gave him, and no matter what happened, he was going to carry out that order without question. Shifting a bit, he closed his eyes and felt for the power he longed was happy with. The now young former Satacho of the Gate 13 breathed deeply, letting the air around him heat up by the rising power penetrating deep within his lungs, letting the familiar burn purify him. Here, deep with this large desert, which from what he could tell was close toward Sunagakure no Sato, he could allow himself to relax his control on his power, which every second of the day wanted to burn everything around it to nothing more than mere ashes. His right hand slammed onto the hilt of his Zanpakuto, his eyes narrowed into slits. Reduce all creation to ash, Yamamoto intoned, calling forth the fire of his Zanpakuto. Ryujin Zangetsu, flowing blade like flame. Flames erupted around him like the sun, casting a fiery blaze that turned the surrounding sand around him for miles to glass in an instant, brightened the area around him like a sun on the very earth's soil. Ryujin Zangetsu was clutched tightly in his right hand, overwhelmed completely by the very flames it created. The black-haired Satacho swung in the direction in front of him, barking out a roar of a command that would have shook the core of any man before him. Taimatsu torch, from his sword an enormous inferno was spawned, a spiral of fire that nipped at Yamamoto himself as it consumed everything around it like a greedy devil of death. The Satacho's now deep blue eyes never wavered, never betraying anything but a determination and a will of iron, and the fire around him left him untouched. Yamamoto took another deep breath through his nose and gave a wordless roar. The enormous firestorm that raged around him leapt to even greater heights, hotter flames that had begun to take on a slight shade of electric blue at their core. With a slash of Ryujin Zangetsu, the young man gathered all the fire swirled around his blade and then with a sharp flare of his power, quenched all the flames instantaneously. The oldest and strongest flame-type Zanpakuto of all Soul Society, Ryujin Zangetsu was still released, but the long black-haired Shinigami had sealed its flames that threatened to consume all around him. The air around him was hot, scorching hot, but it did not bother Yamamoto in the slightest. He had long since learned how to protect his body with his spiritual pressure, especially from the power of the flames that his Zanpakuto wielded. Unlike with Konoha, where he didn't feel at home like he should, he felt truly at home with the flames that surrounded him when he released his partner on the world around him. He was at home with the element of fire. Centuries of using Ryujin Zangetsu, of training with his Bankai, had left him unimpressed with anything less than the heat of the fires of the sun itself. The only reason he had been so badly damaged by Inetsu Jigoku was that he dedicated all of his power to destruction and little to his own protection. With a low sigh, Yamamoto released his grip over Ryujin Zangetsu's flames, allowing it only to manifest as a flame-covered sword. Holding it in front of him, he reached into his soul for his partner, the person that had been with him since the beginning. A moment later, the sword disappeared, instead replaced by a humanoid figure made of orange-red fire, an exact replica of what Yamamoto was looking like. Two tiny electric blue flames burned where a human's eyes would be, but the rest of its face was nothing more than a constantly shifting blaze. "Shijikuni," Ryujin Zangetsu hissed slowly, its voice high and deliberate. "Why have you summoned me of all times like this?" "I seek wisdom," Yamamoto answered quietly but strongly, his eyes staring directly into that of his Zanpakuto's. The strongest flame-type Zanpakuto laughed, a sound crackling like hot embers. "You're old, Shijikuni. When you severed as the Satacho of the Gate 13, your power waned, slowly but surely. You died of a samurai that did everything he could to protect what he thought was right, you have no need of wisdom from me." "I was old," the black-haired Shinigami admitted. "But I still have a duty, one that was given to me by our king, the same man that gave us a chance to fix a mistake like we made 1,000 years ago against Iwich." Ryujin Zangetsu moved inhumanly, his form contorting as it split and rejoined and writhed away into itself. "We have been partners for so very long, Shijikuni. We have won countless battles, and we failed to kill that man 1,000 years ago. As you said, we have a chance to help our king do more with the dimension we have both come from. Why is it that you need wisdom from me? Are you hiding behind duty? Are you afraid you'll fail?" "No, against it which I did all I can to prevent that man from casting darkness over the world that I love, but I failed," Shijikuni admitted, a long sigh passing through his lips. "But I have a new chance that was given to me, a chance to be able to do something to break away from that mistake I made by allowing that man to be able to live 1,000 years ago." "I know you every thought, Shijikuni." Ryujin Zangetsu interrupted, "You've hid out Bankai for a millennium, waiting to catch him by surprise. Even with that, he still manages to do to us what we could not do to him. This chance you say that was given, the only thing I could give you as wisdom is do not show hesitation and end at anyone that stand in your way. You, no we, cannot be allowed to fail. This world may have tossed us aside before like broken glass, but we still have a chance to protect the few people that we still care about." Yamamoto nodded, "As always my friend, you are correct." He narrowed his eyes, a fierce determination filling his eyes like hellfire. "You have my word, I will not allow myself to hesitate any killing any enemy that stand before me. However, you know my advice." "Yes," now Yamamoto's voice had a hint of amusement to it, which was unheard of by anyone that knew him. "As always, you suggest reducing all out enemies to ash and protect what we love." Of course, Shinigami and Zanpakuto chuckled at the long-standing joke before they grew serious once more. "Give all of yourself into every battle you intend to finish. Give all of yourself for those you have sworn to protect. Such is the way of fire. We burn our enemies as we consume everything in our path." The oldest Zanpakuto wavered slightly, looking over the glass-stained desert with an intense look in his electric blue eyes. "It has been a very long time since we've been here. Thousands of years may have passed where we were, but from what I can see, only 3 years has passed." "You are corrected, Ryujin Zangetsu, or should I say your old name, the name that was given to you by my son." A familiar wise voice said, "Kurama." Ryujin Zangetsu's eyes narrowed, taking a deep bow as he looked at the sliver-white figure that stood at his side. "After all these years my king, it is good to see you again." He greeted, his voice deliberate as ever. "But I discarded that name a long time ago, just like my partner, I have lived a full life as Ryujin Zangetsu and nothing more." The Spirit King nodded, his face as wise as ever. "As you say my friend, your name is not that of Kurama anymore. Your name is that of Ryujin Zangetsu, the Zanpakuto spirit of me greatest soldiers." He smiled, "and an old dear friend of mine." The former strongest Biju of the 9 nodded, a small smile playing over his face. "You are right my king, as my life as Ryujin Zangetsu, I'm more powerful than I've ever been." His eyes fell on his partner, who looked at him with a small smirk on his face. "And I was granted a partner that did not treat me as a monster, but as one of his greatest allies." The Spirit King nodded, a small smile playing over his face as he looked at the two standing before him. To his greatest regret, he had made a mistake in case away any chance both of them had as a life in the elemental nations. But that one simple mistake gave them something greater, they are partners of the same soul that will never doubt one another, no matter how hard someone tried. He nodded to himself, that mistake he made was no mistake as he could see, these two will do away with all their power that stood before them. They weren't the monster Kyuubi no Yoko, and the people called him of this world, or the dead last demon brat Uzumaki Naruto. No, they were Ryujin Zangetsu, the strongest flame-type Zanpakuto, and Genusai Shijikuni Yamamoto, the strongest Shinigami. This world will be saved, and it was going to be these two that cast it into a world of peace that it longed for. Snapping out of his thoughts, the ruler of dimensions looked at the young version of Yamamoto. "So my friend," he mused. "How does it feel to be back in your younger body?" Yamamoto smiled a bit, "It is to my liking my king," he said, before his eyes narrowed. I will not fail you, my king, but what is the reason why you have appeared again? The Spirit King frowned. You should already know, my friend. You have the strongest flame type Zanpakuto, and few could hope to come out alive while fighting you. I have restored your youth, but your power remains the same it was before you died against Iwich. The long black-haired Shinigami nodded. I know, my king. He said, the power I had before I was killed is more than enough. I will not let a single enemy stand in my way. This, I swear on my soul. The Spirit King nodded. I know, friend. But even if your power not as it was when you were this young, it is still far greater than most is seen in this world. He explained, this may anger the both of you, but I have to ask you to only use your Bankai if it's absolutely necessary. Shinigami and Zanpakuto nodded, not letting a single emotion show on their face at the word of their king. What he was saying was all but true. Using their Bankai on this mortal plan might cause this world's people to be burned to nothing more than ashes. It irked them a bit, but they knew the reason to why they couldn't use their Bankai. No matter, their Shikai was more than enough to handle anything on this planet that would stand before them and their mission. If it did come to using their Bankai, then they would enjoy it to their fullest extent. We understand, my king. Yamamoto answered for the both of them. The Spirit King nodded. I thank you both for this. This world is young, but it has been through countless battles and bloodlust that foolish mortals has cast upon it. Destroy them who wish to case this world into the darkness, leave nothing left of them. Ryujin Zangetsu nodded, his body flickering like the flame wind around him. Yes, my king. The people you deem as enemies will be left of nothing, not even their souls will escape from us. The Spirit King smiled as his body breaking apart as he began to leave. I have not a single doubt in my heart, my friend. Now go the both of you, a person that sees you as a dear friend. Shijikuni is in trouble from that group Akatsuki. Head to Sunagakur no Sato, find out what you need to find Sabaku no Gaara and kill the ones that captured him. His voice vanished, leaving nothing else behind but the two that stood there. The young Genryusai Shijikuni Yamamoto turned towards his Zanpakuto, both knowing what they had to do to make sure this world was protected. I thank you, Ryujin Zangetsu, for everything you have given me since we became partners. As well as you as well, me friend, Ryujin Zangetsu hissed out, his voice a sort of kind that he only displayed towards his partner. As always, my flames are yours to command. Burn bright, Shijikuni. The fire element of the strongest flame like Zanpakuto swirled, compressing in on itself before vanishing. Yamamoto felt his heart grow warm as his Zanpakuto returned to his soul, and he felt his lips curl into a rare smile. It was nice to have things going his way. His king had gave him a chance to make amends for not being able to kill Iwich, so this was something that he wasn't going to allow himself to fail at. His dark blue eyes narrowed into tight slits. Remember the words his king spoke to him. If what he said was true, then there was no time to waste. He wasn't going to all them bastards of Akatsuki get what they want. They were all going to die, no matter how much they beg for their lives. Genryusai Shijikuni Yamamoto was going to give not a single bit of remorse to any of them. I will kill, he muttered, flames flickering around his entire body like a compressed typhoon of immense power, all within that organization. An enormous flame-like dust cloud hurled into the air, climbing higher than that of the tallest mountains in the elemental nations. Moments later, a figure shot out of the flame-like dust cloud, his entire form covered in a powerful sphere of flame-like Ryatsu. Yamamoto wasted not a single moment, his eyes hardening into murderous slits as he shot forward toward Sunagakur no Sato. Not a single person was going to stop him. It may have been brief in his previous life, but Gaara had made an impact on his life. The red-haired boy that wanted to be nothing more than a monster, live a harder life than he had when he was a Jinchuriki. Compared to Gaara's life when he was young, his life was nothing more than a fantasy to the red-haired boy he remembered. In the distant, watching as the former Satecho shot forward toward Sunagakur no Sato in an impressive display of his power. The Spirit King nodded. With that man here, he knew he had made the right choice. You must hurry, my friend, Sabaku no Gaara needs you, along with that pink-haired girl you cared about so much long ago. As you both say, burn bright. End chapter 2. Onto the story. Like a raging fire, Hada Kakashi, Sharingan no Kakashi, Kakashi of the Sharingan, for the first time, exceeded his own expectations. Even though he didn't allow a single emotion to play on his face, he looked at the pink-haired student before him with a small look of pride in his eyes. For the last 2 years since she had trained under him, he had done everything he could within his power to make sure the girl was ready for the world around her. Haruno Sakura, formerly known as the weakest member of Team 7, had grown over the 4 years to become a powerful shinobi in her own right. More importantly, he had managed to solely focus on his students' training, other than doing what he used to do 4 years ago, just before everything he knew went straight to hell. That's why he couldn't help but feel pride whenever he looked at his student. No longer was a girl who didn't believe she was strong enough to help her teammates. No longer a girl who cared about a boy who didn't deserve her loved in the first place. Sakura had turned into a fine shinobi with the 4 years she had been training herself into the ground, having the sheer motivation to get back up even when she was beaten into the ground by him. She now took her job far more seriously than she did 4 years ago, taking every mission she went on with the greatest of success on her boards. When the team he had failed to teach properly like he should began, Sakura had been a self-centered, vain, and was solely focused on herself and developing a relationship with the traitor Uchiha Sasuke. But now, after all the years of hardship she had now faced since Naruto's death by the hands of the very village that she had sworn to protect, her entire personality had changed for the better and a bit for the worse, as well as he could see it. Even if it wasn't her fault in Naruto's execution, the pink-haired girl had blamed everything on herself and no one else. She believed, to this day, that if she had never loved Sasuke or begged Naruto to bring him back, then he would still be with her right now, still acting like the loudmouth they all remembered. No matter how many times her tried to tell her, beat it into her, she still blamed the blonde-haired shinobi's death on herself. It saddened him greatly to know this, that when it came to teaching his student, he had still failed at helping the pink-haired girl like he had wanted. He could do nothing else but help to make sure that she did not make a mistake that would get her killed. Kakashi didn't know what he would do if she ended up being killed. If it did happen at some point in time, he knew that it would break him more than anything. He scoffed at his thoughts mentally, knowing that everything that he had said about his student, that he was feeling the same way after everything that had happened. His blonde-haired former student, his sensei's son, was now dead and gone, which he had a part in. The silver-haired Jonin would never forgive himself. He should have been able to do something to make sure that his student wasn't killed for something that they had no right to do. He should have seen it coming. Danzo had been trying to make a move to claim Konohagakure no Sato as his own for a long time now, but he never thought that the man would stoop so low to claim what was never his to begin with. But no matter how much he wanted to blame the man for Naruto's death, he knew he should have been able to do something to be able to stop all of it from happening. But what could he have done? Every last option that he played through his head would have played out with her death on his shoulders, and in his heart he knew he could not let that happen. The defection of Uchiha Sasuke to Orochimaru had been the perfect cover, knowing that with Naruto not being able to bring the Uchiha back to the village, the old Warhawk would use this as a reason to have Naruto killed off before he had become a threat to his plans. The execution had nothing to do with hate as some would believe. The reason that Naruto had been killed off was because of the threat he was becoming towards Danzo. The old shinobi had seen the progress Naruto was making, and due to it, he wanted to make sure that Naruto wasn't given a chance to be able to mess up his plans at becoming Hokage when he did. Uzumaki Naruto had been executed because he was a major threat to those bastards' plans in leading Konohagakure no Sato to greatness, as he says, not because of the hatred the village had for him for hosting the Kyuubi no Yoko that had destroyed a major of the village 17 years ago. The silver-haired Jonin cursed himself having not seen this before, thinking that if he would have been thinking clearly, then he might have been giving a chance to be able to save Naruto from his death. But he had failed utterly. Before he was even given a chance with Tsunade and Jiraiya to get Naruto out of the village, Danzo and the council he had taken over had arrested him. Knowing that he would not give in to any demand that they were trying to buy over him, Danzo had threatened someone he cared about, along with using a Genjutsu form, a Sharingan he had stolen, to force his body to make him do his bidding. The silver-haired Jonin could still remember it even to this day, those same words he had told Naruto that haunted him even in his dreams. For what he had made him do, that man deserved nothing more than death sentence of nothing more than torture of the worst kind. Kakashi-sensei, a voice called out to him, snapping him out of his thoughts. He turned a bit, looking to see Sakura's lone dark emerald green eye staring at him. "Are you okay? You seem distracted by something." He chuckled a bit at her, but it was filled a bit with the same failure he had been carrying on his shoulders for the last 4 years. "Don't worry yourself about me, Sakura," he told her. "I might be getting old, but I can still handle myself just fine." The pink-haired girl only stared at him for a moment before turning her gaze back in front of them. Uruno Sakura, the shinobi in question, walked in front of Kakashi with the same emotionless look on her face. Over the 4 years, the pink-haired girl appearance had chanced to rival in her second teacher Tsunade in sheer beauty. She was no longer the petty girl she once was when she was 13, due to her wanted nothing else but to be the best to fulfill the goal she's after. She developed her body into one that could last a very long time in battle. Her body was well developed, giving her the body of a well-toned curved woman, and even though she hid her expression on things better than anyone Kakashi had seen in a long time. He could clearly see in the way she acted that she was proud that she was no longer the girl with a small breast size. Her size in that department wasn't as big as the former 5th Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, but it was a bit close, due to the way the many men that stared at her when she passed them. It fitted actually, the way her appearance had heightened by chance, now being the height of 5'7". Her pink hair was no longer short, due to her no wanted nothing to remind her of her past sins, she had grown her hair to a considerable amount. In all reason, her hair was something that wasn't fit for a shinobi to have during missions, but Sakura could care less about any of that. Her long pink hair reached to the very ground, but she kept it in a long ponytail, along with long bangs cover her eyes from view. Her left eye, the one that had been damaged beyond repair by Naruto, was covered by the long bangs from her hair, but she kept it tattered long ragged that covered it fully from others' view. Her standard attire had changed a lot from the red kipao dress she used to wear. She now wore a black backless sleeveless undershirt and an orange-blue jumpsuit jacket which she had left before Danzo had all of Naruto's belongings burned. On her arms were black wrist guards and on her back was a jagged personally carved X-shaped scar that the pink-haired girl had put on her body. She wore a black hakama with a blood-red sash holding it all together. Around her neck was the same necklace which she had taken from Naruto, the one thing she said that held her close to him after he was gone. Her headband was worn on her right arm, the same one Naruto wore 4 years ago before he was killed. I wonder how Konohagakure no Sato has changed over the years, the silver-haired Jonin asked, trying a bit too lightly up the mood around him. The long pink-haired girl scoffed a bit at that, nothing's changed Kakashi-sensei. She said with the same expression on her face, just like before we left, the rest of my so-called friends along with their senseis will still hate us. In her heart, the long pink-haired girl knew that she would always hate them for what they forced her to endure during the 2 long years she had stayed in Konoha to train under Tsunade. Due to Naruto being executed by Danzo and the council, the black-haired Warhawk had made it personally for everyone in the village to know that it was Team 7 that gave him what he needed to make sure that the demon was killed off. Believing the lies that Danzo had wrought against them, both her and her sensei were treated like nothing more than scum towards of the rest of the people she graduated with, along with a good portion of the shinobi that were still loyal to Tsunade. But she couldn't care less about any of them, the only thing she could do about it was to endure the pain that they put her through as long as she could, knowing that Naruto had went through far worse during the last days of his life on this world. Sakura could do nothing else but take it all in, not worry about it in the least, and focus on nothing else but the training she needed to complete to get far stronger than she was. She scowled mentally at that, remembering just how weak and useless she was back then when Naruto had needed her the most. But back then, when she cared of nothing else but that heartless bastard Sasuke, she did not even care to see all the things that Naruto had done to take care of her. No matter how many years had passed since that day in the cell she had shared with him, she could not say that she held no love for Naruto like that of Hyuga Hinata, it was just something that she knew she never deserved in the first place. When she had went to see him that day, he had given her all the pain she had deserved from him, even though she knew she deserved more than what he had given her. The day she had went in there she was not looking for Naruto to forgive her, what she had gotten was Naruto's pain and anger at being treated like this from the village he had sworn to protect, and she had gladly taken it all in. For 2 long years she had trained as Tsunade's student, learning everything she can from the woman who was held as the strongest kunoichi in the elemental nations. For the sake of extracting revenge on Uchiha Sasuke for what he had done to a boy that wanted nothing else but to save him, the pink-haired girl knew that she needed all the power she could to set out for what she had wanted. Even though it was little, she had managed to learn all she can under her master, along with becoming a chunin as well. With Kakashi and the 2 years they had been away from the village, she had become stronger than she could even imagine. She had taken everything that her sensei could teach her, being a kinjutsu, ninjutsu and jinjutsu as well. Sakura had wanted nothing else but to be ready for when she went after him, to finally make him pay for what he had did to Naruto. During her travels with Kakashi and learning from him the ability of a certain massive broadsword that still was in Nami no Kuni, she had traveled to take the sword, but it only broke it in half to take a large part of it. For her to make a weapon for her like that might be able to carry the same abilities of that of the Kubikirabacho. Even though the weapon she had made looked nothing like Kubikirabacho, she had been pleased a bit to know that the swordsmith had been able to place that same abilities in her blade as well. Looking down at the massive naginata in her left hand, she had felt more welcome with it more than she had in a long time, since everything had been shot to hell in her home village. The blade, known as Kai Shoken, Blood Redemption, was truly a massive work of art that would be praised by any shinobi or samurai who saw it. The black long handle of the blade consisted of several hilts of blade, which was connected by a chain that held them together. The large blade itself was jagged as well, having pieces of the blade curve out to give it a truly demonic look to it. In the center of the blade was a blood-red line that ran down its center, a certain piece that she had personally wanted place on it. The blade had become her pride and joy, and due to its height and sheer weight, she had become a few in this world that was able to wield it. To be able to wield it, Kakashi had taken her all over the elemental nation to be able to wield it as best as she could. The brutal and rough training she went through, along with almost dying several times on this journey, she could finally say that she was worthy now to be a shinobi. Even though it was Konoha that took away her teammate, she had sworn to herself that she would protect it, thinking that Naruto would at least want her to do it. If he was here and none of that would have happened, then she knew he would do all in his power to protect the village he wanted to lead one day. Even though she hated the man that now led the once great village, she wanted to protect it for the people she cared about that was still called that place home. Shaking her head a bit, her attention turned back towards the road ahead. They were currently walking through the dense forest just outside of Konoha. The sky was bright blue, with the sun's rays peeking through gaps on the trees. She gazes up a bit, remembering all the happy times she used to have before her team was destroyed by one's revenge on his family member. She could still remember them chasing after the daimyo's wife cat, along with the other D-rank mission they went on with the sky looking like this above her. A sudden shift in movement caught Sakura's attention, turning to his left to see a messenger hawk with a scroll on its beak flying towards her. Her brow furrowed before turning to Kakashi in confusion. The black-eyed jonin had gotten word of all other missions before they arrived, giving her time to prepare, but she apparently had got not a single word about this one. "You didn't tell me I had a mission," she spoke in a light voice, which she only preserved for people she still cared about within the village. Sticking her right arm out, the hawk landed directly on it a second later. Kakashi shrugged a bit, the solid black haori on his body moving as he did. Just like her, the sliver-haired jonin had changed a lot over the 2 years they had been gone as well. He still wore the standard clothing of a shinobi, but he had dubbed a black haori, which was covered with lighting around the bottom and the sleeves. His hair had grown longer as well, cover most of his headband and right eye more than it did 2 years ago. A standard katana was strapped on his back, its red handle peeking from his right shoulder. His hands were wrapped in bandages but left his fingers exposed. "I might have gotten word from missions before, but this one I know nothing about. From what I can see, it's a mission from Tsunade-sama and not that of Danzo," he said, looking over the seal that had been placed on the scroll. It had been something Tsunade had made herself after her position as Hokage had been taken up by that of Danzo. The seal still held the sign of Konohagakure no Sado on it, she held a small sign of the Senju clan on it as well to tell the shinobi that was loyal to her that it was from her. The hawk opened its mouth, dropping a scroll in Sakura's hand before flapping its wings and leaving. Looking at the hawk as it went for a minute, the pink-haired Kunoichi stabbed Kai Shoken in the ground next to her. "No matter, if it's a mission from Tsunade-sama, then it must be something important," Sakura replied with a small frown on her face. Kakashi nodded a bit, straightening his stance a bit as he waiting for his student's reply of the mission they were suddenly given. "So, what is the mission?" he asked one Sakura but the scroll down before tossing towards him. Catching it, he quickly read over it before a sigh of annoyance passed through his lips. "She wants us to do a typical hunter ninja's task." Sakura spoke as she picked up her large naginata. "Since we're so close to where the prisoners were last seen, she wants us to take care of it." Kakashi nodded, apparently a jailed ninja managed to escape a few hours ago and should be close like you said. He focused his chakra before using a single-hand seal, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique. Seeing a clone popping into existence, the pink-haired girl nodded a bit. "Scooting to see if the clone can get to the prisoner before us." She turns back around before jumping into the trees, followed by her teacher, who had already sent his clone out to find the escaped prisoner. The sliver-haired jonin nodded, catching up to stand directly on side on his remaining student. "If it's all good to you Sakura, I really want to get this over with quickly," he answered her. Sakura said nothing, only nodding and gaining speed in the direction of where she thought the enemy might be at Konohagakure no Sado Senju Compound Central Office. "Good job on completing your mission, Hinata," the former 5th Hokage said, looking at the now confident Hyuga girl that was standing before her. These 4 years since Uzumaki Naruto's death had been the worst for the remaining living heir to the Senju clan. The first year, when everything that had happened had taken the life of a boy that she considered her son, had broken her more than she had liked. During that full year, she had been nothing more than a broken mess which she was still ashamed of. The first 4 months, she had been in a life-threatening coma that most though she would not wake up from, but somehow she had managed to wake up from it. But even though she had managed to wake up, she was still nothing more than a mess, a broken woman from what she had been before. The princess of Konoha knew from her heart that she could not stay like that for long, no matter how much she wanted. The village that her grandfather had a major part of building needed her, and she did not want to leave this place without a leader. Even though she wasn't 100% like she would have liked during those crucial times of Konoha, she still had enough to be able to fight for what she believed in from those bastards that killed her godson. The blonde-haired former Hokage had lost her position, but that did not mean that she lost a bit of power and loyalty she had from the shinobi of this village. It wasn't nearly as much as she had when she was Hokage, but it was still enough to be able to keep the village afloat as best as she could from the shadows. "You're welcome, Tsunade-sama," the dark blue long-haired Hyuga said, bowing formally as she did so. Over the 4 years, the shy Hyuga had changed drastically since the death of the only boy she ever loved. Those words the blonde-haired shinobi told her raced through her ears at each passing second, pushing her more to change herself into a better person that he would be proud of. Hyuga Hinata has retained her straight Heim-style haircut, but she has let her hair grow and flow to waist length. The short strands that frame her face remain, but are now shoulder length. Her figure has also grown much more womanly, giving her the appearance of a shy beautiful woman that most men of the village adored more than anything. She had, like most shinobi of the village, donned the standard uniform of her village inclusive of flak jacket, only with several modifications to fit her likes and style. Although she still wore her forehead protector around her neck, its color has changed from blue to a dark but solid orange, something that she wanted to do to remind her of Naruto. Her face was more mature over the 4 years of training she had endured from both her father and her cousin Hyuga Neji, along with being a lot more confident than she was before. Everything she had done over the years had been for Naruto's sake and herself, to make sure wherever he was at right now, that he was proud of her for finally being able to stand up to herself. Like her cousin's hyper teammate Rock Lee, she had gray bandages covering her hands up wrist. She had figured out of the 4 years since his death that being weak and shy about everything was really no longer an option for her. To be strong enough to protect what she cared about and change Konohagakure no Sato back to its former glory, she needed nothing to hold her back like her shyness to speak out for what she believed in. Watching him for so long had taught her that, to believe in what you thought was right, no matter what got in her way. Due to her confidence and change of attitude for the better to be stronger than before, her father and cousin, along with the rest of her family, helped her become stronger than she had ever been before. Now, after 4 years of hard training and learning all she can, she was one of the strongest kunoichi within the village, a title that she was proud of to be given by her friends and family. Her rightful place as heir was given back to her due to her father seeing just how much potential she had growing inside of her with each day that passed between them. It was something that she was proud of. She was no longer the shy failure Hyuga girl she was back then. She was now a proud kunoichi, one that will do with all her power to change her home village back to the way it was. A small smile graced her lips, knowing that she was not alone in that journey. The Konoha 9, her friends were by her side, ones that had the same views as she did as well. "You're done for today, Hinata." Tsunade spoke up, watching the look in the girl's face as she did. The dark blue-haired girl nodded, a small smile playing over her lips as she did. "Thank you, Tsunade-sama." She stood up straight and turns, walking towards the entrance of the large room they were currently in. "You know Haruno Sakura and Hada Kakashi are coming back today." The Hyuga heir froze at those words, her right hand tightened around the doorknob until it starts to cave in due to the strength being pressured onto it. "That's good to hear, Tsunade-sama." Hinata said a bit low, her voice laced with calm anger. "But you are telling the wrong person this news. I care little that the two that caused Naruto-kun's death are about to return." The blonde-haired former Hokage sighed mentally at this, knowing that she should have still known that the Hyuga heir cared little for the remaining members of Team 7, especially that of Sakura. After Danzo had those lies to the village, the now-known Konoha 9 had wanted nothing to do with them, calling the both of them nothing more than scum. Both her and Jiraiya wanted nothing else but to clear everything up, bring the 3 teams together to tell them the truth. But both Kakashi and Sakura had refused, saying that their hate for them was something that they deserved for failing to help out a teammate that needed them the most. It was a hard thing to do, being that she cared about both Kakashi and Sakura, but it was something that both of them wanted, so she could do nothing else but respected their decision. Shaking her head with a small sigh passing through her lips, she waved her hand a bit to dismiss the young woman before her. "You're free to leave, Hinata." The dark blue-haired Hyuga nodded once more before leaving the office. Her footsteps echoed throughout the hallways as she hurried out of the large compound. She respected Senju Tsunade more than anything, but she could not see the reason why she even allowed herself to even be in the same room as those two. From what she had learned, Tsunade had treated Naruto-kun like he had been her own son, and when he had been murdered by the council and Danzo, she had broken down from it. At first, just like the others, she hated the blonde-haired heir of the Senju clan for having a part in murdering Naruto, but had learned the truth on what had happened to her and Jiraiya-sama. The same thing could have happened to both Kakashi and Sakura as well, but it was very hard to believe due to the way both of them had acted towards the sun-kissed blonde-haired sunshine she looked up to. Hada Kakashi, the self-proclaimed strongest jonin in Konohagakure no Sato, wasn't any kind of sensei to her whatsoever. Since he led Team 7, and from what she had read and seen, he had been nothing more than a useless teacher and helping that traitor when he asked for it. To her, Kakashi didn't teach a single thing to Naruto-kun, only leaving him with the skills he knew in hope of the blonde-haired shinobi being killed. It must have been a surprise to him that Naruto was no one to back down from anything, that he would fight to prove that even failures can become something. His nindo to this day was something that Hinata had sworn to upheld, no matter how many hardships she went through. It really shouldn't have been a surprise when Kakashi didn't even try to help Naruto during the last days he had on this world. He took the other option in putting him down and calling him nothing more than a failure. She couldn't forgive that man for what he had done, and although it saddened her to hate someone, that hate she held for the sliver-haired jonin was going to be something that she lived with. Haruno Sakura on the other hand was someone she hated more than anything, everything that had happened to Naruto-kun was because of her. If she would have never begged Naruto to bring back a traitor, if she would have never allowed him to fall in love with her, then maybe he would still be here. But none of it seems to matter to her, but making a mockery of his memories, she didn't even have the nerve to even show up to see his execution. For that, she deserves nothing more than hate for what she had did to a boy that did nothing but loved her. "Hinata," a voice called out from a short distance away, "Hinata. Is that really you?" The voice snapped her out of her thoughts, eyes widening slightly when finding herself outside the Senju compound building, apparently too deep in thought to even notice. She turned to the source of the voice to see Ino walking towards her, her long blonde hair bouncing with each step she took. "It's good to see you, Hinata," the blonde-haired young woman said. "Did you just get back from a mission?" "It's good to see you as well, Ino-san," Hinata replied, smiling a bit at one of her friends, "and to answer your question, I have just returned from a mission, about an hour ago to be exact." She found a frown suddenly making its way on her face, one that Ino picked up on instantly. "I just had to go over things from the mission with Tsunade-sama." "I see," Ino muttered, crossing her arms over her well-developed chest. Her eyes narrowed a bit, seeing the somewhat angered look on the kind Hyuga before her. "Are you late for something? Or something happened when you talked to Tsunade-sama?" Hinata smiled a bit, looking over the young woman before who she considered a great friend of hers, since everything that has been happening over the 4 years. Since Naruto's death, Ino, to her surprise, was angered that the village had done something like to Naruto of all people. Even though Naruto had annoyed her constantly with the way he acted all the time, it didn't mean that she hated him so much that she would want him killed. Finding out that her former best friend Sakura had something to do with her own teammate's death, the heir to the Yamanaka clan, had cut off all ties with the pink-haired girl, believing she was wrong for what she had done. Just like the rest of the Konoha 9, Yamanaka Ino had been the few within the village that did not hate him for what Naruto was. Due to the 4 years that has passed, the blonde-haired bossy young woman had changed as well to a look of a grown woman. Her blonde hair had grown back from her fight with Sakura in the Chunin exams, but longer than it was previously. Her formerly protruding bang has now flattened against her face, and the bandages around her waist had been removed, revealing her bare well-toned stomach. She also replaced the warmers on her elbows with fishnet ones and wears a pair of the same on her knees. Along with these, she wears a short purple sleeveless blouse, an open front purple apron skirt over a shorter black shirt with short fishnet shorts underneath. She was wearing a dark purple short-stacked medical jacket that stopped directly at the end of her ribs. On the back of the jacket was the status she earned as a medical ninja, along with her clan insignia on the far left side. Her forehead protector was wrapped around her waist, being used as a sash, somewhat. Above her medical pouch were short tanto that was given to her by her father. She has also changed her hoop earring to the studs given to her by her sensei after they passed the Chunin exams as a long-standing tradition. "It's nothing really to worry about, Ino-chan," the dark-haired Hyuga said politely, the frown still edge on her face. "It's just that, Tsunade-sama wanted to inform me of some reason that Haruno-san and Haddock-san was returning to the village." The blonde-haired young woman frowned at that, feeling a bit livid that she even had to stand to look at them now that they were coming back. It was kind of odd though, a bit suspicious if you look at it more. Tsunade-sama knew that none of them really cared about those two after what they had did, so what was the reason why she would tell Hinata of all people that they were returning to a village that they had a hand in destroying? Maybe it was just the blonde-haired woman trying to make those two feel like they were like, which was useless to even try when it wasn't even an option after what they had done. All of what was happening to them they deserved it, maybe going through it might give them the chance of know what Naruto went through before he died. Putting a hand on the Hinata's shoulder, she smiled a bit as the girl turned to look at her. "Don't worry about it," she assured her. "You want nothing to do with them, just like the rest of us, so you have no reason to see them when they return." Hinata smiled, nodding at her friend's words. She was correct. She wanted nothing to do with those two after what they had done, it was just something that she would never forgive them for. "Thanks, Ino-chan." She thanked, pleased that she'd gotten that off of her shoulders. The smile on Ino's face widened as she jumped a bit, giving the girl at her side a thumbs up. "It's nothing," she replied. "It's what friends are for, isn't it?" Continuing her walk away from the Senju compound, Hinata turned her gaze toward the blonde-haired young woman at her side. "So, what is it that you needed, Ino-chan?" Ino's eyes widened and a frown suddenly covered her face. Seeing that look, Hinata grew a bit worried, thinking that something bad had happened. "Did something happen?" she asked. Shaking her head, Ino looked in front of her with the same expression on her face. "No, it's not that," she answered, "it's that I was ordered here by the Rakudame Hokage-sama to bring you to the Hokage office." Confused, she asked what was on her mind. "And why would he need me of all things?" she asked, an ice-like chill coming to her voice. Danzo, one that did not even deserve to wear the hat of Hokage, was another person that she hated more than anything. "Not just you, Hinata-chan." Ino informed her, he wants all of us, the rest of the Konoha 9, along with Kakashi and Sakura as well. Even though she was trying to avoid them, being that she might make a mistake in trying to kill them, another person she hated was going to be in the same office with them. It was going to be hard for her to control herself, but it was something that she needed to be done. To make sure that she was elected as Hokage in the future, to turn Konohagakure no Sado into a village that Naruto-kun could be proud of, then she needed to follow his orders, even though she didn't like it. She nodded and began walking in the direction of the Hokage office, a place that she hoped that nothing happening to cause problems for the goal she was aiming for. Let's go Ino-chan and get this over with, she said. Konohagakure no Sato's forest, a few miles away from the village. The long pink-haired Kunoichi jumped from tree branch to branch while making sure to scan the area around her for any sort of traps, just in case the prisoner that they were after was clever enough to delay them before reaching them. She had yet to see any sort of trap, but it was better to be careful rather than rash in pursuit mission like this. Either way, it wasn't like she was as worried as she would have been 4 years ago. Due to the training she endured through the 4 years, she was confident enough that she could take down anything that was before her. Being able to track chakra had its perks, which she was a bit happy to have. It was something that Tsunade had helped her with to be able to use. Kakashi-sensei just helped her out even more to be able to use it without hand seals like others. Her skills to sense chakra weren't as good as others that were well trained in this skill, but it was enough to be able to help her in battle when she needed it. Due to not wanting anyone to hear what they were planning, both she and Kakashi had made up false statements on why he made the shadow clone. The real reason for the clone was to just scout ahead for traps or other things that might cause problems for them. The silver-haired Jonin had gone to the southwestern part of the forest, trying to find the partners of the criminal that had managed to break out of a ninja village's prison. She, on the other hand, wanted to be careful. Taking both of her masters' teaching to heart as she sent 2 clones in front to see what her prey was doing. From the information she had gathered, the prisoner was entering a wooden cabin not too far from where she was currently at. The second clone had stayed near the cabin just in case the prisoner left once more, ready at any moment to expel to give her the information she needed to find him. Her eyes remained as expressionless as ever, but inside she was a bit irritated to dealing with something like this. But it was something that she was ordered to do so by her master, who she still believed was the rightful person to wear the hat of Hokage. Calm down, Sakura muttered to herself while shaking her head a bit. Getting irritated at a time like this would end her up in trouble. She needed to get this done to make it a bit pleasurable for herself. She was going to carve that ninja to pieces for doing something like this. Ridding herself of those thoughts at the moment, she continued moving through the woods before finally making it to where the other clone was. It stood against a tree with its arms crossed, apparently bored with the whole ordeal, but didn't let a single bit of it showed on its face. The clone looked up, watching as its original landed on the ground a few feet away from it. Standing straight, it clicked its tongue a bit in annoyance. The prisoner is over there, inside that cabin waiting for his other 2 accomplices. It dispelled immediately after that, knowing that its job was finished. Sakura stared at the place where her clone had vanished before turning to glare a bit at the wooden cabin yards away from her. It was a clear area in front of it, being well hidden a bit with the trees that covered a large portion of it from view. She had to admit, just a bit, the cabin was well hidden, but not as well hidden as they might think from shinobi, who knew what the hell they were doing. It was nothing impressive really, but she thought it was kind of odd for a cabin like this to be on the outskirts of Konohagakure no Sato like this. No matter, after she killed the ninja inside the cabin, she would simply destroy it with a strike of Kai Shoken. Let's get this over with. Sakura stepped out of the line of trees that was blocking her from view, nearing the cabin in short steps. Her left hand clenched around the long handle of Kai Shoken when she heard footsteps, her bloodlust starting to rise as her pupils started to dilate a bit. She stopped dead in her tracks and waited, jaw clenched in anticipation, before a man stepped out of the cabin. Stepping out of the cabin and feeling a storm of bloodlust that was washing over him, the man's eyes widened as he looked at the young woman that was standing before him. Sakura's expression remained as emotionless as ever, but her brow rose mentally at looking at the person that reminded her of one of the academy instructor. The man standing before her had shoulder-length, white hair that has a slide of blue to it, and green eyes that was filled with a hint of insanity to them. He was muscular and well-defined and built to the point that she dismissed him as being a member of the Ninja Academy when she was there. He was wearing a short open blue vest with sleeves torn off and tight black pants with a dark brown belt with a silver rectangular belt buckle. The man's eyes were wide as he took in the young woman that stood before him, but the initial shock wore off when took a good look at who the ninja was that was standing before him, her pink hair being a dead giveaway. Haruno. He breathed out, a laugh building up in his chest as he did. Haruno Sakura. Sakura furrowed her brow a bit, trying to figure out who this was that was standing in front of her. Giving up on it, thinking that it didn't matter since he was going to be dead in a few minutes, she raised her massive naginata in anticipation. It was only a small amount of hope in her voice, but she did hope that this ninja before her could give her a bit of a fight before she killed him. This is truly pathetic. The white-haired man said with a laugh. He held his arms over his shoulder a bit, a casually smirk on his face, like he thought the girl before him was not a threat in the least to him. Is what Konoha sent after me? One of the weakest girls I remember being in the class that graduated 4 years ago. This is truly sad. I will not ask again, who are you and how do you know me? You seem to not remember who I am. Well, it has been 4 long years since we have seen one another. He said, I'm your former teacher at the academy. He was going to say something else, but he was cut off as a massive blade came down on his right arm, severing it from the shoulder. He looked at his right arm on the ground for a minute before falling to the ground and screaming in pain. A few inches away from him, in a stance with both hands on her massive naginata, the long pink-haired girl's right eye was narrowed a bit into a tight slit. It was no wonder why she remembered him a bit. This was the same man that had tried to kill both Naruto and Iruka-sensei 4 years ago. Looking down at the worthless scum that was close to her feet, she slammed a kick directly on top on his head, breaking the ground a bit under him. She could care less that he was in pain, it was something that he should take in from what he had caused Naruto 4 years ago. She raised Kai Shoken high above her head, but paused as she thought of something. From what she had heard about Mizuki after she had become a ninja, he wasn't one that was very smart to be able to break out of jail like this. It was also weird that he was still around Konohagakure no Sado when he should have taken the chance to run as far as she could away from this place. But he had stayed, seemingly waiting for something or someone to come and meet him. Her eyes narrowed, feeling what she was thinking was something along the lines on what he was trying to do. Positioning the massive naginata for the tip to be pointed at his back, she pushed it downwards to stab him directly in the stomach. RGGGGHHHHH. The white-haired former teacher screamed in pain, trying to struggle a bit to get from under the girl's red sandals. Growling softly in irritation, she brutally slammed a kick on his back, feeling it break under the chakra-enhanced strength she put behind it. Shut up and stop screaming like a coward. She growled out, and tell me why you are still here. Knowing that he was going to die, the white-haired man chuckled. Wouldn't you like to know, he said through a blood chuckle. But since I'm going to die, I might as well tell you. Then stop talking nonsense and speak. After I was given leave from the prison, I was told by them to pick up a package at this cabin for Orochimaru-sama. He informed her. Sakura frowned at that. Where was the package coming from? She asked, what was the item that was being picked up? Mizuki said nothing, almost succumbing to the fatal wounds he had upon his body. Frowning a bit at the lack of information, she pulled out an explosive tag before slapping it against the white-haired prisoner's back. Once done, she began walking away while her large blade was on her left shoulder. She placed her right hand in a single hand seal in order to activate the tag left behind. The ground behind her exploded in a large cloud of dust, leaving no sign of the cabin or body behind. Not even looking back to see what happened, she leaped into the trees in the direction of where she could feel Kakashi's chakra coming to an ease, probably due to him killing the two that had followed Mizuki. Sakura ran through the top branches of the tree, now that her mission was over. The former teacher had made a mistake to leave himself wide open when in battle like that, thinking that she wasn't a threat to him at all. It didn't matter to her. Either way, it was a mistake that cost him his life, thinking she was the same as before. The mission was over now, and she would finally be able to see just how much Konohagakure no Sado had changed since she had left 2 years ago. A few minutes later, she heard an explosion in the distance. Narrowing her eyes a bit, she picked up speed and burst from the trees and landed on the ground. Looking up, she saw Kakashi standing a few feet in front of her with his katana clutch in his right hand, covered in blood. Hearing something familiar behind him, the silver-haired Jonin smiled at his student. Flicking the blood off his katana, he walked towards the silent pink-haired girl while sheathing the blade on his back. It seems you're finished, Sakura. The silver-haired Jonin acknowledged, glancing at the blood that was still running down the massive naginata. Who was leading these two? He pointed towards where the bodies used to be. It was Mizuki, the long pink-haired girl informed, former teacher at the ninja academy before he was arrested for treason. The silver-haired Jonin's right eye narrowed. What is he doing in Konoha's forest, then? He asked, shouldn't he be long gone from this place? Unless he left his question hanging a bit, knowing that the girl before would give him what he wants. He was here to pick up a package for Orochimaru, she told her teacher. Before I was able to ask what the package was, he died. Kakashi nodded a bit, feeling he already knew what had happened. Very few that had faced Kai Shoken and took a direct hit from it lived long to tell the tale about it. Good job, Sakura. He congratulated her. Did you dispose of the body? And did he tell you anything else? Narrowing a bit, she informed him on everything she knew, which caused the silver-haired Jonin to frown deeply. If what Sakura had said was true, then in Konoha was a traitor who is walking around spreading secrets that they could not allow to escape from here. It was a high possibility that it was Danzo, trying to see if he could find any information on them. 2 years ago, Tsunade-sama along with himself and a few others that still trusted him, came up with a multiple-stage plan to be able to get Tsunade back into office. Even now it was risky, due to the growing power Danzo was gaining throughout the nations due to his underhanded tactics. No matter if a spy was around watching them from every angle, then all they had to do is find that spy and dispose of him. Good job Sakura, he nodded before taking off into the forest towards Konoha, still in deep though about what he had heard. Kakashi-sensei, Sakura called out. What is it Sakura? Do you think it has something to do with what we are planning? The pink-haired Kunoichi asked, her face still expressionless as she kept her speed with her teachers. Do you think this has something to do with Danzo? Kakashi nodded, if you can, write down everything you told me and what you think they are planning on a scroll Sakura. He ordered, if I'm right about this, then very soon, there is going to be a war to see who has the right to rule over Konohagakure no Sado very soon Konohagakure no Sado, Hokage office, Senju Jiraiya, Gamma Sennin Toad Sage of Konohagakure no Sado was growing impatient. His black pupils were narrowed into slits as he looked at the bastard sitting at the desk of the Hokage that he did not deserve. He wanted nothing else but to kill this bastard, to lay waste to all the pain that this man had wrought upon the village that his sensei had given his life for. But he knew had to wait for when they were given the right chance to kill him. If he moves now out of anger, he would ruin everything that they had planned these 2 years. The years he's been a ninja had taught him this, it was only a short more while before they were able to accomplish what they wanted. The past 4 years had been hard for him, changing his entire personality from what it had used to be like for the better from his point of view. The way he had acted had cost him his student son, a boy that he was named his godfather. But when the boy had needed him most, he had been away from the village when he should have been here trying everything he could to help his godson. It had been his greatest shame and one of the biggest wake-up calls he was ever given since being born into this world. After making sure that Tsunade was better to be able to work on her own again, he had made sure to train himself into the ground to be ready for anything that would happen to the people he did care about. His appearance had changed drastically from what he used to wear 4 years ago, the only thing that still remained was the large summoning scroll on his back. His waist-length spiky white hair was still tied back into a ponytail, with 2 shoulder-length bangs that formed both sides of his face. He also still had red lines that ran down from his eyes and wore a horned forehead protector with a kanji for oil, which denotes his affiliation with Mount Myaboku. He now wore a standard Konohagakure no Sado attire for all her shinobi, the only difference was that his was black and he wore his student's flame like Haori. His face was more cold-like and the perverted acts he used to do, he no longer did, blaming it for the reason why he wasn't able to get here in time to save his godson. His wife, Senju Tsunade, the woman he had loved ever since he had known her all those years ago, had finally agreed to marry him after both of them had suffered from the loss of Naruto. It had been one of the greatest days of his life when the woman he loved had said yes, even though they had lost Naruto because of these bastards, they both had learned how to love each even more than they already had. Due to having her by his side, he had not changed into a dark person who wanted nothing else but to destroy Danzo and the entire Anbu Root division. She had helped him learn how to control himself, along with helping her move on with her life since Naruto had been murdered. Over the 2 years after Tsunade had finished teaching Haruno Sakura, they both had come together to train harder than they had ever had, bringing their skills up to levels that had never achieved before. Tsunade, now being a bit back the way she was before Naruto death, wore a completely different outfit from what she wore before. She wore a tight fishnet shirt that held her breast in place on her chest, giving her a younger look than before. She was dressed in a tight but a bit loose white kimono with dark red outlining on it. Being open all the way at the front, he showed her wearing a tight muscle shirt that covered a good bit of her large breast from view, only showing the top part of them. She wore a large red sash that was tied around her waist, which was embarked with the Senju clan's insignia on it. She wore bright red wrist guards that covered her hands to fit like gloves. Over that were metal greaves that stopped at her elbows. She wore tight black long-sleeve pants, along with a kunai pouch and medic pouch at her right hip and her lower back. Holding the white kimono together was an insignia of her clan and that of Konohagakure no Sado. Her expression was matching her husband's, one that was filled with annoyance as she waited for her student and Kakashi to arrive. What the hell are we waiting here for so long for? A brown-haired Chunin asked, an annoyed expression on his face. Standing by her teammate, the Hyuga heir was asking herself the same question as Kiba and just said. It was odd really, what would be the reason for Danzo to call all of them here for like this? Something must have come up or it had something to do with the things that had been changing in Konoha recently. Due to Konohagakure no Sado's power increase back to where it was previously at, Danzo had been trying with everything he could to take control of more land outside of the Land of Fire. Frowning even more at that, she was a bit livid that he was gaining more land even though he did not need it in the first place. The old warhawk before them had always perched that he wanted nothing else but Konoha's safety, but what he was doing was leading them to war that might start up with the country of both Kumagakure no Sado and Kurigakure no Sado. Trying to eliminate Konoha's enemies when they did not have any would lead to nothing more than senseless war, but the man did not seem to care about any of it. From what she had saw from the 4 years he's been running as Hokage, he wanted nothing more than power within his hands. It was sickening to watching, and she could not believe that the daimyo himself would allow this man to lead this village of all things. "Stop talking, Kiba," the dark brown-haired teen said, standing on the side of Hinata. "You know like the rest of us why we are here, it has something to do with what happened in Sunagakur no Sado." Scoffing a bit, the Inuzuka heir nodded a bit. "I know that, but what is the reason why he is holding us for so long in this office like this?" he asked in growing annoyance. "To me, it makes no sense whatsoever." Standing near where teammate, Shikamaru narrowed his eyes a bit at what was being said between the team on his side. It was true, something was odd here that Danzo would call all of them here for like this out of the blue. He had been doing what he had been assigned to do, watch over Sabaku no Tamari while she was within village walls. He was able to keep tracing on with his thoughts, but the door to the Hokage office suddenly opened up, making his eyes open wide with shock at who walked in. Not only was it Hada Kakashi, but Haruno Sakura as well, the two that had caused Uzumaki Naruto so much pain without him even knowing it. From what he was seeing, they both had changed drastically from the 2 years they had been away from the village. The girl standing at Kakashi's side, who he thought was Sakura, was dressed in cloths that was similar to that of a samurai. Looking at the massive blade in her left hand, he took a step back a bit, being clearly imitated by its sheer sides. Something of that size should be impossible for anyone to be able to wield without problems, but the girl before him was holding like it weighed nothing more than a few pounds to her. But what clearly shocked him a bit was the blood that was dripping down the blade. It really didn't take a genius to figure out what she had done before she came into the office. "We're back, Tsunade-sama, Jiraiya-sama." The silver-haired Jonin greeted, eye smiling at the two that stood before him. Tsunade smiled upon seeing them. Both of them, teacher and student, seemed to have grown over the 2 years they've been gone. She could see in his lone eyes that Kakashi had changed a bit due to the way he held himself in a constant ready stance for anything. Sakura on the other hand, her second student, seemed to have changed the most out of the two of them. Her lone eye no longer held the large amount of guilt behind her eye. It was still there, but it wasn't as much as it was before 2 years ago. She was impressed by the large naginata that Sakura held in her left hand, telling her that the girl was increasing her strength along with her chakra control. "It's good to see you two again," Jiraiya said, a laugh passing through his lips. "From what I can see, the both of you have gotten a lot stronger." Sakura nodded, a small smile going over her lips. "We have," she said. "The only thing now is to see if it is enough to help us out." "That's great," Kiba suddenly spoke up, glaring at the two that stood before him and the others. "We have both helpers and a killer here with us now." He cast his gaze towards the two Sannin. "Was this the reason why you were holding up for?" "Shut up, Inuzuka," Jiraiya stated coldly, giving the brown-haired Chunin a cold glare. "It is none of your business on why we make you wait, the only thing you have to do is follow orders and nothing else." "From who?" a voice said from behind the large white-haired man. "You forgot, Jiraiya, they are my ninja, not yours. When you are made Hokage, then you can give those orders, but until then you are in the exact same position as they are." The large white-haired man clicked his tongue his sheer hatred, but nodded his head towards the Warhawk. "My apologies, Hokage-sama," Jiraiya growled out a bit. "It won't happen again." The shinobi no Yami nodded, feeling a bit pleased that the Toad Sage can't see that it was he that ruled over this village, not him. "See to it that it doesn't happen again," he stated. "Now, what is the reason on why you held us up like this for these two, princess?" Tsunade frowned at that, not liking that one of her titles was being used by the man that had messed up her family for the last time. The man before her appeared as a frail old man who would normally walk around with a cane. He had black, shaggy hair, and his right eye was bandaged, concealing that cursive Sharingan he had used on her to give out the order to have Naruto executed. He wore a white shirt with a black dark grey robe over the top of it covering from his feet to just over his right shoulder. Just like her husband, she wanted nothing else but to kill this man for ruining the village her grandfather built along with having Naruto murdered, but she knew she had to wait. Stepping forward a bit to put herself in front of Jiraiya, her eyes narrowed coldly at the man sitting before her. "Several hours ago, we received word about a prisoner breaking out of jail by unknown was," she explained. Danzo's lone eyebrow furrowed a bit. "Oh?" He spoke a bit, sounding curious. "If what you say is true, then why wasn't I informed about this?" "It wasn't needed," Tsunade continued, the same look on her face. "Since I had been able to get the message when it came in by messenger hawk, I sent it to give it to both Kakashi and Sakura to be able to carry out." "Who gave you the order to do such a thing?" Danzo stated coldly. "Are you just as much a fool as that husband of yours? Or have you forgotten that you are no longer worthy to run this village?" Jiraiya growled darkly at the insult to his wife, but was held back a bit by Tsunade's arm that was keeping a tight grip on him. "No, I have not forgotten about how I'm unworthy to govern this village." She answered him, a calm look being replaced in her eyes. But due to it being only something small as this, I wanted it to be done quickly, which I thought that you would want as well, Hokage-sama. Not letting it being seen in her expression, the princess of Konohagakure no Sato's eyes narrowed a bit, looking at how Danzo's eyes seemed to twitch a bit after giving her report. She'd figure it out later, but if she was correct, then the man before her had something to do with that man being able to escape from jail like that. It was all the reason why they needed to be more careful with their plans. She looked back at her husband to see that he had the same look on his face. Nodding at the reason behind it, the Rakudame Hokage leaned back a bit in his desk. I see the point out of Maid Tsunade, just make sure it doesn't happen again. He said, even though you are a great hope to help Konoha from his enemies, it would be far too easy to find an Anbu commander that can replace you. I hope you remember that. Tsunade nodded, stepping back a bit, my apologies, Hokage-sama. Danzo said nothing, not even looking at the blonde woman's direction. Now, the reason all you are here are simply, other than that of Jiraiya and Tsunade. The 6th Hokage explained, 30 or so minutes ago, we have received word that the Kazekage of Sunagakure no Sato had been captured by the organization Akatsuki. Hearing that news, the entire room of people eyes widened at hearing that. Standing by her teacher's side, Sakura's remaining eyes narrowed in anticipation, thinking that this would be the perfect change to be able to find Uchiha Tachi. There wasn't much information on Orochimaru and his hideouts, and every time they got close to finding them, they would manage to escape just before they had arrived. This was her only chance to make sure that Uchiha Sasuke showed his face. If she killed Itachi, then that bastard would come running for her for revenge. She clenched her fist in anticipation, practically tasting Naruto's revenge on her tongue. A few feet away from the pink-haired girl, Sabaku no Tamari froze at the news at what she had just heard, feeling her entire body grow cold. That couldn't be true. How was it possible for Akatsuki to be able to get in her village and capture her little brother like this? It just didn't seem possible for something like that to happen. Over the 4 years, her little brother had grown to be one of the strongest ninja with the elemental nations. Should it be really that easy for a criminal organization to walk in the village like that? She could not stay here any longer, she had to get back to Sunna to be able to help get her brother back at any cost it would take. She turned around to leave without a word, but glared hatefully in front of her as 2 Anbu root agents stood before her, blocking her way out of the office. What the hell do you think you're doing? She all but snapped, turning her dark green eyes on the black-haired Hokage. I'm sorry about this, but I do not have time to stay here. I need to get back to my village to help get back my brother. The Konoha stayed silent for a moment, all their faces edged with worry as they thought about Gaara. I know that, Sabaku no Tamari. Danzo stated collectively, not letting a single emotion spread across his face. That is the reason why they are here. He pointed towards the 3 teams that were standing on the far left of Team 7. The dark blonde-haired woman was shocked a bit, you're helping us? She asked a bit suspicious on where this was going, for what? Danzo turned his gaze away from her, not even bothering to give her an answer. Now that you know the reason on why I called all of you here, I will be sending team. He was cut off as Sakura suddenly appeared before her, a dark expression on her face as she stared him directly in the eye. Okage-sama, Sakura said, a mask of emotions on her face. I would like for you to see me and Kakashi to help in the rescues of Sabaku no Gaara. If he was surprised, he didn't let a single bit of it show on his face. Why would I do something like that? He asked her, the same look in his eyes as he stared at the girl before him. Your status as a ninja is poor at best, and you seem too weak to be able to handle a mission of this rank. Sakura kept her face expressionless, but inside she was livid that this old bastard would dare call her weak after everything she had been through. 4 years of pain, being beaten into the ground until she found the strength to get back up has proven that she had gotten stronger over these years. Among the people around her age in the room, she had full confidence in herself to be able to beat any one of them if given the chance. But none of that mattered right now. This, right now, was the chance she had been waiting for. The people she was after would sure be a part of this, all she needed to do is make sure that she was given the mission to be able to go. Yes, I must agree with you that I was weak 4 years ago. Sakura said, her voice holding the same sound to it as always. But over the 4 years I have changed, I'm stronger than I have ever been, and I will not fail this mission if you allow me to go. Danzo shook his head, looking over towards Team 8. Even though what you are saying is true, he started. But neither you nor Kakashi is fit for a mission like this. We need a team of ninja that would be able to track the Akatsuki down, and Team 8 is the reasonable choice in the matter. From where she was standing, Hinata felt herself smile at this. If her team is given the chance to be able to help Tamari-san out, then it would give her a chance to be able to talk to Gaara again after all this time. After Naruto-kun had died, she had gotten close to the red-haired Sunna ninja, being that both of them had looked up to Naruto for what he was. He was a good friend of hers, and she wanted to do all she could to be able to help him out as much as she could. If I may, Tsunade stepped forward. From what you are saying, then both Kakashi and Sakura would be perfect for this. If Gaara is injured, then they will need an experienced medical ninja to be able to treat any injuries that he may have. Kakashi is one of the greatest tracking ninja Konoha has. If you really want this mission to be successful, then you will send them to get the job done. Anzo frowned, feeling a bit angry that one of his own shinobi would have the nerve to tell him what to do in his own office. No matter, if everything did go right the way he wanted it to, then both a potential enemy and a rival village would fall. He grinned mentally at this, feeling that everything would work out to where he wanted it. Tsunade didn't even realize that she had planned something that would work in his favor. It was only a matter of time before he received a letter about Sunagakur no Sato falling due to not having a Kazekage. Tossing the thoughts aside for a while, he nodded towards the blonde-haired Sannin. "You are correct, Tsunade," he said, casting his gaze at both Kakashi and Sakura. Team 7 has been giving a new mission, S-ranked. You are to go to Sunagakur immediately and assist them in the Kazukige's retrieval Sunagakur no Sato's front gates. 3 days later, it had taken them 3 days to arrive in Sunna, and in all those days Sakura didn't let a single word pass through her lips. She didn't need to, she was finally be given the chance she needed to be able to grasp the revenge that Naruto so rightfully deserved after what he was put through. Sakura just hoped a bit that she was ready, that everything that she had trained for and learned was up to the task of facing ninja of S-class. This was not the time for her to be worried about anything, the only thing she needed to do is focus on the mission ahead and make sure that she did not fail. Reaching the large sand gate of Sunna, they were stopped as a tall Sunna shinobi surrounded by several others stood in front of them. "Halt," he ordered, "what are Konoha shinobi doing here? The treaty made by our villages states that you are now allowed in, unless it has something to do with the well-being of the village." Temari stepped forward, "Baki-sensei." She acknowledged, "They're with me and they are here to help in trying to bring back Gaara from being captured by those bastard Akatsuki members." "Help?" queried Baki, surprised by this a bit. "Yes. Due to our Hokage thinking you might need help, he sent us to help as much as we could," Kakashi informed, stepping forward to answer the questions that was playing through the head of the head Sunna Jonin's head. "If you think we are lying to you just to enter your village then," he took out a scroll and handed it towards him. "Then this will justify why we are here." After reading over the scroll, Baki frowned and the two that stood before him. Even though he hated being grateful for taking help from a Konoha ninja, he had to push down his pride and knew that in this situation that they needed it. Since the two most hated shinobi in both Sunagakur and Konohagakur were here to help them, he had to make sure that these two shameless scums would not do anything while they were here. His lone eye traveled towards a ninja that was standing by his side, giving him a silent order. The ninja nodded and jumped away. If they were going to stay here and help, then he had to make sure that his village was protected from a threat that stood before him. The silver-haired Jonin's eye narrowed, not letting a single emotion pass over his face. If Baki thought he didn't see that, then the Sunna Jonin would be sadly mistaken. He was glad though. Before they had arrived here, he had gone over everything with Sakura that he knew was going to happen when they entered the Sunna village. It wasn't that they were worried about it, the hateful looks by shinobi was something that they had gotten very used to of the past 4 years. Those looks didn't faze them in the least, they were not here to make friends like most would think. The mission was the only thing that both of them was worried about. Tossing a look over towards his remaining student, he nodded his head and began following Baki into the village. Baki, one of the head ninja within the village of Sunagakur no Sato, was a very tall man. He has 2 distinctive red markings on the right side of his face, the only visible part of his head, with the rest being covered by his turban-like headgear and by a sheet hanging from it on the left side of his face. He donned the standard attire of a Sunna ninja, complete with a forehead protector and flak jacket. His personality was that of a loyal, kind and respected ninja. Although like many Sunna ninja, he could be ruthless and stern in battle, as they are all trained to put accomplishing missions before comradeship. But most of that has changed over the 4 years, due to Gaara becoming the Kazekage during that time. Following close by her teacher's side, Sakura kept her mind on nothing else other than the mission before her. Most of the things she was here for, she could care less about, but due to Gaara seeing Naruto as a dear friend before his death, she would put all her power into being able to help Gaara back towards his village. This was also a great opportunity to be able to lower Akatsuki's numbers, they just had to tread carefully on the way, not falling for any traps that they might set up. The large blade in her left hand was eager, she could almost feel his screaming for the blood of those who brought this upon themselves. All she had to do is wait for a bit longer, then everything would go the way she had wanted for a long time to come. "Baki," Temari spoke suddenly, eyes still filled with worry. "Where's his Kankuro? Is he okay?" Baki sighed sadly, "When the Akatsuki left with Gaara-sama, your brother he was cut off as the air around them suddenly got extremely hot, almost getting the levels of being unbearable for them to stand around in the open." Seconds later, what seemed like a powerful wave of chakra seemed to slam into each of them, causing each of them to break out into sweat. Sakura looked around her, gritting her teeth as she pushed her body as hard as she could to not allow herself to pass out from the sheer force of it. Something was wrong here, not a single source of energy on the planet should be able to exert them much power. But whatever was doing it with any problem whatsoever. Was it the Akatsuki doing this? She shook her head at that. Even though they were strong, Sakura didn't believe that a single one of them could be able to do something like this. Turning her head a bit, she looked at her sensei who was also struggle a bit to breath. What is this? Kakashi-sensei? She asked. Kakashi looked at her, seeing several shinobi around her that seemed to be on the verge of suffocating on their own spit. I thought that it was a tailed beast, he tried to explain as best as she could. But the feel of this power feels different, along with being far more powerful than anything I have ever felt. Before Baki was able to say anything, Temari looked at the sky above them with a look of horror on her face, as a huge flame-like comet seemed to shot down towards the front of the gate. Before she was even given a chance to warn everyone, the comet slammed into the ground, causing a massive explosion on impact. The shock wave that followed it blasted them off their feet, knocking them hard into the buildings that seemed to have melted a bit due to the intense heat that was around them. Flames seemed to be everywhere, causing the very ground they were standing on to becoming nothing more than glass. Most of the Sunna ninja had been knocked unconscious, scattered across the area on which their bodies had landed. What the hell? Baki shuddered out, picking himself up from where he was. He looked up, eyes widening at seeing a single figure walking out of the firestorm that was slowly falling apart around him. He shuddered a bit in fear. The look in the man's eyes gave him nothing more than fear of the worst kind. It was as if he was nothing more than a mere ant to this man, even though he looked younger than he was. Sakura, Kakashi and Temari were in the same boat, looking at the man that was walking towards them with a dark look in his eyes. The man walking towards them was tall, seemingly standing at the height of 5'9" or 5'10". His black hair was long, a bit shorter than Sakura's was, but in a neat long ponytail that blew in the wind. His eyes were a dark blue, almost the shade of the sky darkening when it's growing dark. His entire body was built from what they could see, showing a body that was far more muscular than most shinobi they had seen. He was dressed in a black shihakusho with a white sash towards his waist. Blowing in the wind behind him and somehow not being blown away from the explosion mere seconds ago was a white haori which he had draped over his shoulders rather than actually wearing it. At his right hip, which Sakura had instant taken notice of, was a standard katana with a dark purple handle and a circular hand guard. Even though he had the katana in his sheath, for some reason, Sakura could practically feel the power radiating from the blade. It caused her to shiver in fear, it was like the sword was made for reaping lives. Getting over his shock, Baki narrowed his eyes a bit as he looked at the man. Surround him, he ordered, now. Shakily, and filled with fear, the Sunna ninja that did manage to stay conscious from the unknown individual's arrival, surrounded the man in a circle. Baki stood, along with Temari and the remaining 2 members of Team 7. They walked slowly towards the man, with a lot of caution due to the power the man had admitted. A friend or an enemy, they didn't know which one he was. That's why they had to stay on guard at all times. From the man's stance and the way his dark blue eyes seemed to glare at all of them, it looks like he could kill all of them without any problem at all. Who are you? Baki asked, looking at the man with a now dangerous look in his eyes. But it was nothing more than a front, affixed to make sure the man didn't see the great fear that had built in his eyes. The long black-haired man said nothing at first, casting his gaze towards Team 7, which grew darker when landing on them. Both Kakashi and Sakura stepped back a bit, both ready themselves if the man made a move to kill the both of them. It was no surprise that over the 4 years that has passed, that Konohagakure no Sato had gained more enemies than they ever had before. The only thing they can think of was that he was nothing more than an enemy sent to kill them, probably from a village that Danzo might have sent shinobi in to attack to take over their government. My name is Genryusai Shijakuni Yamamoto, the man said with a voice that demanded nothing but respect from all around him. Why are you here? Temari asked, her war fan ready at any moment if the man attacked. Who sent you here? Where is Hibaku no Gaara? What if Naruto Zanka no Tachi and Bleach? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.